squats away, bent by the sound, then coughs straight again. The rebels retreat, leaving only space between Harm and the advancing Vagrant.
"Here,"
says the green-eyed man, holding out the baby.
"I'm sorry."
There are more words, explanations, but they die in his throat when he meets the Vagrant's eyes. The Vagrant reaches for the baby with his free hand. The baby reaches for the Vagrant. Fingers nearly touch. A click sounds sharp from the doorway.
"Nah, I don't think so,"
Joe spits.
"I'll be taking that baby." "It's over, Joe,"
Harm replies softly. The gunman rubs at the new swelling on his temple.
"Shut up!"
The Vagrant starts to turn.
"Don't move!"
Joe shouts.
"And keep that sword where I can see it. If the bloody thing so much as waves, I'll put you down."
He glares at Harm.
"And as for you, you freak, I'm going to put a hole right through those weird eyes of yours, you two-faced, double-crossing..."
The sword comes down in a swift cut. Air sings. Harm jumps back. Tina hides her face. Rebels tense.
"What?"
Joe says, incredulous, his hair lifting as the sound wave passes.
"You think I'm joking? I'll..."
With a chorus of gasps, the essence lamps go out.
"Kill you?"
Cries of alarm mingle with muffled footsteps. Harm stands, shock still, waiting for the first gunshot. The baby wails, its cry distinct in the dark. He curls his body round the baby as the second shot grazes his shoulder, pushing him down on his side, hard. The third bullet passes overhead. Cold stone slaps one cheek, a tiny fist the other. One of the rebels rekindles a lamp, making sense of the soundscape. People cower in corners, bodies scrunched small. The Vagrant rises from his crouched advance, moving to strike. Joe's surprise curves into a smile. More than a sword length separates them. He fires as the Vagrant swings. Blade and bullet meet. Sparks flare, and the shot ricochets harmlessly upwards. Still too far away, the Vagrant stands, sword stretched high, body exposed. Joe levels the pistol, but his smile falters at a sound behind him. Before he can understand its nature, an unknown force collides, charging hard against his legs, knocking him forwards. At speed, the goat emerges from the tunnel. The Vagrant's eyebrows shoot up. The sword comes down. Joe follows a moment after. There are no sparks, no fire, and this blood does not burn. It stains the blade, running along its edge, forming drops, falling. The Vagrant nods to the goat, but she doesn't respond, running past, head twitching left and right, searching for an exit. The Vagrant frowns, looks the way the goat has come, peering into the dark. Faintly, something moves. The sword's attention fixes on the motion, thrumming a warning against the Vagrant's hand. Its sound is caught by the approaching menace, sent back, distorted, a strangled cry of metal. The Vagrant sighs, his shoulders droop, then he forces in a deep breath and straightens.
"The usurper's knights are here!"
Tina screeches.
"Shut the door! Shut it, now!"
Stunned rebels begin to move, unsure of which enemy to face first. Some watch the intruder in the room, others move to the door. Harm pushes onto his knees.
"There's another way out of here."
The vagrant crosses to the green-eyed man, towering over him.
I could show you.
Again, Harm offers the baby. Sheathing his sword, the vagrant takes the baby and holds it. His eyes close. Little fingers worm into his hair, turning circles. Harm waits while rebels struggle with the door. It closes. A brief denial of what comes. Reluctantly, amber eyes open. Harm swallows, meets them.
We have to go.
The vagrant nods, retrieves the goat. Tina has hobbled to the shadows of the opposite wall. At her touch, one deepens, opens. Rebels race for the new door, friendships forgotten in the rush to live. The rat bread is knocked aside, crushed against the wall. Fatigue buckles knees. Frustration drives her down. She draws a breath.
Help me, please.
The vagrant walks past without looking down.
Please!
Harm closes the way behind them. The door pushes her back into the chamber, muffling the baby's cries on the other side. Hands shaking, Tina reaches for the wall, pulls, begins to stand. Behind her, the essence lamps grow brighter. Her injured leg fails, and she clings to the wall until fingernails fracture. Behind her, the door shakes with impact, rippling like rusted water, boiling, moaning. Sweaty faces shine in shielded lamps. Box-laden, men and women labour through tunnels. Maxie leads them, hair spikes combing the ceiling. At the rear of the group, Tough Call stands, watching for pursuit. Max waits with her, huge hands cradling a cylinder, an acquired treasure. Fine engravings run its length, unnoticed through thick calluses.
You think they're coming, boss?
The kick is affectionate but firm. Keep your voice down. And yes, they're coming.
You see them?
Tough Call hunches forward, peering into the pistol scope. Not yet. A droplet of sweat rolls down the back of Max's skull. Slow at first, it gathers speed down his thick neck, racing on to meet its fellows, budding in the curve of his back.
But if you can't see them, how do you know they're coming?
She kicks him again, firmer this time. Robed figures enter her sights. They walk in single file, a queue of killers, patient. From the hidden recesses of their ranks, she hears bones grinding together, an alien laughter. Max forgets to whisper.
Was that patchwork?
Bring down the tunnel.
That was patchwork, wasn't it?
Max, bring down the tunnel. He looks over at her.
You sure, boss?
She doesn't look back. One eye closed, the other pressed against the scope. You want to be a glove puppet for the uncivil?
No, boss.
You want to be turned into pick and mix for the half-lifers?
No, boss.
Then stop asking stupid questions.
Sorry, boss.
She holsters the pistol, puts her hand on his shoulder. And Max?
Yes, boss?
Before you fire, give me a 5 count.
Sure,
he says. But Tough Call is already running. A low rumble shakes the underground room. Dust shrugs downwards, settling on the knights of jade and ash, who wait, ever patient. From the commander's hand, a rat bread dangles, bare feet lightly brushing the floor. She stares, eyes wide and vacant, temples pulsing in time with the living metal at her throat. The commander releases her. It has been difficult, connecting with essence so dry. Stubborn like cement, it slows thought. Yet the commander has left the necessary mark in her mind. Around it, cracks have started. Muscles fail on the rat-bread's face, and her right cheek succumbs to gravity, mouth turning down on one side, a confused squiggle. But behind the empty eyes she knows what is sought. With effort she approaches the wall, injured leg dragging behind. The knights watch, expressionless. Memories move slowly. Hands spasm in momentary rebellion. Then they move among the stones. The hidden door opens once more. She sniffs, thick air invading her nose, making her sneeze. She sniffs again, sifting scents till she finds it, faint, hooking her nostrils, compelling her forward into the tunnel. Like shadows, the knights follow. In his arms the baby nestles, content. The vagrant blinks against the dust, pulling his collar across his mouth. Ahead, the earth roars again, and chunks of stone fall from the ceiling, shattering around the feet of the fleeing people. Their essence lamps quiver, but stay lit. The vagrant does not slow, staying close to their reluctant guide. Forced to keep pace with him, the goat flicks her ears, irritated. Other branches present themselves, but harm does not take them, still following the rebels, moving towards the source of the noise. He glances back at the vagrant, eyes dipping guiltily to the hidden bundle. Ahead, the rebels are conversing in tense whispers. They cannot go back. Can they go forward? What should be done? Anxiety becomes inertia, and they slow to a crawl as footsteps come pounding through the dark, numerous and giant. They ready their weapons. Then a rebel cheers. A familiar voice answers. Maxie. Verdegree's resistance reunites, clasping arms, swapping well-worn names. Tough Call moves among them, firing questions. She does not like the answers. Her last question is asked angrily. A forest of fingers points towards the vagrant. Harm speaks as she marches towards them.
It's not his fault. It was Joe. He...
Looks like we have a problem, she says loudly, pushing aside the green-eyed man. I've brought down 2 of the entryways to hold off Patchwork. With luck, we've buried the bastard, but more likely we've slowed them down. We were coming back this way to get somewhere defensible, but now I'm told we've got trouble in the southern passages too.
The usurper's knights are right behind us,
Harm says quietly, as if pronouncing a sentence. Wait a minute, Tough Call says, looking round. Where are the others? None of the rebels answer. Did the knights get them? The rebels look uncomfortable. We're not sure, says one, eventually. Right. Tough Call runs a hand through her hair. Everybody, crack open those boxes. Looks like we'll be testing these weapons sooner than we thought. She gives her attention to the vagrant. My hands are tied here. There's going to be a fight, and it'll be hard as hell. I don't know if I owe you, or if there's bad blood between us, and right now I don't care. We could use your help, now more than ever. The vagrant shakes his head. I get the feeling that's non-negotiable.
It's this way,
Harm says, beckoning. Tough Call puts a hand on her hip. You going too?
Yes.
There is no time for argument. None is made. Good luck getting out of here. We don't use the other tunnels much, and there's a chance they won't have survived the quakes we've made. Nodding, the vagrant starts to leave, but Tough Call grabs his arm. Word is, those knights are only here 'cause of you. If you could draw some of them off, it'd give my people a better chance of survival. Shrugging sharply, the vagrant breaks away, leaving the rebels behind. He goes harm's way, weaving through passages long forgotten, crumbling. Away from the rebels and the fighting, silence presses in. Only footsteps and ragged breaths challenge its dominion. Tiny fingers rise from inside his coat, probing upwards. They find stubble and pause, thoughtful. Not satisfied with his chin, the fingers stretch higher, questing. At full extension they find a nose and grip hard, scissoring, clamping nostrils shut. The vagrant coughs. Harm's voice is gentle.
It bothers you, leaving them behind?
Nobody responds. The baby squeezes harder. Torchlight glimmers at the corners of the vagrant's eyes. From far away comes the cry of fresh destruction. Harm and the vagrant tense, and the goat bleats unhappily. Walls rumble and rocks drop from above. Gradually, things settle. The passage remains. The group move on.
I think that was more of Tough Call's heavy artillery.
The vagrant nods slowly, little fingers still clamped to his face.
She must be desperate, trapped between the usurper's knights and Patchwork's forces.
Harm glances at the other man, his face solemn.
It'll be a slaughter.
The vagrant bows his head, keeps walking.
I know we didn't do right by you, but that's on me and Joe, nobody else.
Their footsteps echo, rhythm unbroken, heading north. With unknown purpose, the baby's hand begins to twist and twist. The vagrant stops, his sigh nasal. Gently he liberates his nose, guiding the hand back into his coat. Then he draws the sword, tapping it lightly against stone. It sings, one note, long and round. When it stills, he taps it again and again, charging the air as minutes pass. In time it is heard. 6 off-key replies disturb, followed by another, deeper. The sword's silvered wings twitch in anticipation. Harm smiles, soft.
Thank you.
At speed, they depart. Every few steps, every new turn, the vagrant declares their presence. Now the replies are constant, gaining. Without need to discuss, fast walking becomes jogging, then running. Rubble springs up at the edge of their light. Fresh dust floats, decorating the collapse. Harm examines the damage, hope of escape fading.
We could go back, try another route.
The vagrant nods, sheathing the sword, and they rush the way they came, towards the hunters, coming to a side passage, narrow, unused. Harm plunges in. Strands of web break on his face, masking, tickling his mouth. He stumbles, the torchlight jerking, catching glimpses of skittering, shy things. In places, the roof has fallen, forming mounds that trip, raising the floor. An arm bursts from the vagrant's coat, grasping. He tilts his head back, foiling fingers that scrape past his nose, snaring his bottom lip. The baby chuckles. They run, breath coming harder, legs slow, no longer light. The passage opens up, becomes vast, its edges unseen. The vagrant stops, shoulders drooping. Harm collapses against the wall, letting ancient stone take his weight, lungs working like bellows. With an air of finality, the goat sits. Harm moves the torch slowly, revealing the remains of the old city, a monument to what was. Buildings have become pillars, curves beautiful beneath flakes of dust. They stop the sky from falling. Just above head height, pipes run. They are dead now, purposeless. In the centre of the square is a statue, features lost to time. One arm is missing, the other extends, palm upwards, holding a pitted orb. Hills of rock and debris intrude upon ancient streets. They begin to explore. Cracks in the wall are numerous, big enough to promise escape. Other passageways present themselves, 3 still usable. The vagrant points at the highest, and Harm starts to climb. The goat does not move. The vagrant frowns and tugs at the leash. The goat does not move. The vagrant closes his eyes, swaying slightly. He takes a breath, exhales, opens his eyes, and pulls. Much to its displeasure, the goat is standing. With deliberation, the vagrant follows Harm up the rubble slope. The goat bounds ahead of him, mockingly agile. The green-eyed man is waiting inside the new corridor, pointing at a gap in the stone wall.
You see that?
A shaft of light cuts across the passage, winking sporadically.
There's an essence lamp on the other side.
Harm peers into the hole.
It looks like a cellar, still in use.
Using the back of the torch, he begins to batter at the hole, making it crack and widen. The vagrant joins in, kicking at the wall. A sound stops them. Not the keening of a tortured blade, but the clank of armour.
They're close,
Harm says, voice fearful. He redoubles his efforts to break through. The vagrant looks back down the passage, then down to the baby. It giggles, reaching for his face again. He lifts it closer, lips pressing against its cheek. Then holds it out towards the green-eyed man.
What are you doing?
Harm asks as the baby is put into his arms. The vagrant wraps the goat's leash around Harm's wrist and points at the hole, urgent. Harm looks into the vagrant's eyes, words squeezed through a throat suddenly tight.
I understand. I'll wait for you beyond the north gate.
He feels the vagrant's fingers gripping his elbow, fingers hard against the bone.
I understand.
While Harm struggles through the hole, the vagrant drags his feet back towards the cavern. He looks back once, twice, and is gone. Chapter 13. From high in the cavern, the vagrant sees them coming. Tina emerges first, slack-limbed, followed by the knights of Jade and Ash. He waits at the passageway's edge, hidden, his laboured breathing held slow and quiet. At the commander's signal they spread out, searching for him, sensing his closeness. Without lamps, only their essence is visible, luminescence seeping green through visors, joints and cracks in their living armour. The ratbread looks up, pink eyes finding him in the dark. Her foot points in his direction, but she does not let it move, refusing to go closer. Within her broken mind impulses war. Fear rises, matching in strength the compulsion to obey. Taut muscles quiver, threaten to cramp. In ignorance, one of the knights walks the way Tina stares. Seizing his chance, the vagrant accelerates down the hill of rubble, scattering chunks of stone. The sword's wings unfurl, its unblinking eye fixed on the target. A low hum sounds as it splits the air, like a bomb from the heavens, descending. But the vagrant is tired, his edge dulled, and the knight raises its own blade to fend him off, turning the mortal wound brutal. The knight falls back to the safety of its companions. Though the sword wants to strike again, there is no time to finish the injured infernal. Other knights already approach, like sharks drawn to blood. The vagrant struggles in the dark, climbing towards his perch, to the exit he must bar. This time, the knights are faster. 2 scramble ahead, blocking his escape. Another 3 advance together, blades reaching for his heels. He is forced to face them, to catch the heavy blows with the sword, two-handed, body jarring with each impact. They drive him up the slope, strike by strike, towards the pair on higher ground. The vagrant does not fight to win, but to delay. Grudgingly, he gives way, pushing against every attack. Sweat coats his face, dampening the dirt that inks his scowl. At the base of the rubble, the commander waits. It is nearly time to engage, to break the malice. But something is wrong. Something is coming. Another's essence intrudes on the chamber, muted, dangerously close. The commander steps back from the fighting, prepares itself. Lights wink from a lower passage, and a river of robes rushes forth, numerous, violent. There is no mistaking the half-alive cult of the uncivil, or their leader. Patchwork has come, drawn by the sounds of the malice and the chance to revenge itself against the usurper's knights. The commander turns to face them, raising the stubby lance, but something snakes out from the shadows, dead flesh coiling around the commander's bracer, pulling the weapon wide. Tina vanishes in the initial charge, final thoughts smashed beneath hammering feet. The half-lifers break about the commander, spilling either side, grabbing for arms and legs. The commander begins to lean. A knee buckles. More bodies join the fray. The commander cannot move its arms, cannot aim its weapon. It fires anyway, and flames belch outward. Flesh, necrotic or otherwise, burns. Further up the hill, the vagrant is safe from the flames. He parries another wave of attacks, the sword song losing resonance. The knights press their advantage, unaware of the shadow unfolding behind them. The vagrant's mouth drops open, and the sword glares at the new arrival. The knights pause. Jade light pales. They feel the wrongness too late. A shroud of teeth ripples through the air, wrapping itself around a knight. Within the black cloth, bones grind on metal, essence boils, and Patchwork claims another victory for the uncivil. 4 knights remain. 2 between the vagrant and Patchwork. 2 between the vagrant and the way out. They are slow to react to the change of fortune, weapons twisting in their hands, grief-stricken. The vagrant, too, is slow, arms drooping, heavy despite the sword's enthusiasm. Already to his right, Patchwork begins to rise, ratcheting erect, wide thin body becoming tall thin. The curtain of robes lifting to reveal the ruined shell of its victim. The vagrant spins from the sight to the pair at his back and charges, swinging the sword wide, a desperate note. The first knight parries, its sword groaning with effort. The vagrant pushes past, and blades stroke each other, blue sparks dancing downward. He stumbles on, head bowed, into the path of the second knight. It stands ready, sword poised. The vagrant tries to raise his guard, but muscles falter. The sword's eye bulges with anger as it dips, blade tip brushing the floor. Defenseless, he steps forward. The attack does not come. With clenched teeth, the vagrant raises his head, staring into the fathomless dark of the knight's helm. For a moment, neither move. The knight sees no fear in his eyes, cannot read his essence, cannot think of anything save the sword that glares, promising death. All too easily it remembers what the malice did to its companion. It wavers, uncertain, when the vagrant steps forward again. Another step brings them close, like lovers. The vagrant doesn't turn from the knight, doesn't blink. He continues to push forward. The knight steps aside. The vagrant keeps walking. Behind him, Patchwork gives chase, dodging between the other knights. From below, the commander watches, its armor scorched but intact. Corpses smoke, welded to their killer, a mass of smudged limbs. It pulls against them until an arm and a weapon come free. The lance is damaged, coughing tears of fire. More half-lifers threaten, but the commander attends only to the scene above, raising his weapon at his enemy's enemy. Patchwork glides after the vagrant, coiling and launching after his prey, faces eager. Airborne, it closes the distance quickly, but from behind comes a roar, faster. It is the sound of the commander's lance misfiring, exploding. Air ignites and rock falls, removing the vagrant from sight and slamming into Patchwork, half burying the uncivil's duke. Exposed bones flap impotently, laughing no longer. The commander looks at the hand that held the lance. The fingers of its gauntlet have been woven together in the lance's explosion, fused in a lump, unrecognizable. New assailants approach the commander. Half-lifers climbing over their dead brethren, keen to finish their hated foe. The commander reaches for its sword. 8 years ago. The usurper has defeated Gamma of the Seven, has stood against and surpassed its infernal peers, becoming a monarch among monsters. Yet this does not seem like victory. A remnant of Gamma lives on in her sword, a thing of malice, dreaming of its death, stirring wounds deep within. The usurper is growing accustomed to Gamma's body, adjusting to the feelings of being contained and defined. As it moves further from the breach, the world's reality asserts itself, ever stronger, rejecting. The usurper treats it like any other enemy, fighting, pushing back. Each time its forces kill or corrupt, the usurper inches forward. Each time the breach convulses and fresh clouds of essence belch into the world, it is like wind in the usurper's sails. Even so, the invasion will be long, and both sides are already injured. The sound of a challenge draws the usurper's attention. The head of the infernal horde is breaking around a metal snake like a river around a stone. A lonely cannon spits defiance as the usurper's lieutenants smother the ailing vehicle. Something escapes, however. A silver arrow streaking skyward, leaving bright fire in its wake. The vessel is too small to hold a body, too small even for a sword. The usurper wonders as to the arrow's purpose. In moments, the clouds have hidden it from view. Something about the lone warrior in the metal snake draws it in. Gamma's wings no longer allow flight, scything air as the usurper moves forward in long, ponderous leaps. Sensing their master's interest, the horde abandons the attack, leaving a metal snake's shredded shell. On top sits the Knight Commander, head tilted like a merry king, fingers still gripping the triggers of the ruined cannon. The usurper studies the warrior like a favoured book, tracing the contours of strength and loyalty etched in the old knight's bones. It comes closer, raising the body it carries as an offering. In response, the Knight Commander draws his sword, cutting the air with song. The usurper waits. The Knight Commander bares his teeth, and sweat runs into his eyes. Muscles tremble, fight, fail, and his sword slides downward with a sigh, wistful. Slowly, the usurper lifts the body towards the old knight, like a mother bringing a babe to breast.
No!
Exclaims the man, struggling, his seat unwilling to let him go. From within the eyeless body, something stirs, issuing forth from red holes to pour into the Knight Commander's mouth. He dies instantly, but not soon enough. The usurper steps back. It is not enough for the usurper to simply take another empty body. This man must be made to kneel, just as one day the world will conform to the usurper's design. All through the Knight Commander's corpse, changes occur. The sliver of the usurper's essence absorbs the remnants of the man, blending with it, becoming something new, greater than before, and less. Unlike its infernal parent, this blended being has a clawhold in reality, tenuous, but enough. Enough to move freely, to hunt. Straps tear from their housings, and a new thing rises, the Commander. The once proud Seraph Knight is no more. The Commander's sword is lifted in salute, and the blade shrieks in protest, cries stretching out as metal distorts, twisting, protesting, succumbing. Smoke issues from the rents in the Commander's armour, hissing softly until the essence turns crystal, fossilizing, dull and green. The Commander asks no questions. It does not remember its previous lives, but purpose burns within it. An urgency defying words, a memory of malice that must be quenched, of peace that must be found. The usurper approves of what has been wrought. It begins to search the battlefield for more of the Seraph Knights, hoping that some might yet live. Corpses do not interest it. To occupy a vacant space is insufficient. The usurper wants more, to dominate, to re-envision. Of the 10,000 knights that came, less than a dozen survive. But one of them has already fled, and 2 are quick-witted enough to take their own lives. The usurper gathers the others and returns to the breach, blending the fragments of their souls with a raw, alien essence, shaping twisted versions of what was. The Knights of Jade and Ash. Chapter 14. The Vagrant places one foot after another, slowly, never stopping. Muffled through stone, he hears a sound like the death cry of a giant. From its scabbard, the sword thrums in agitation. He keeps walking, slowly, never stopping. Passageway becomes cellar, becomes steps, becomes house, becomes street. He heads north, slowly, never stopping. The gate remains open, and he goes through. The suns are low in the sky, and he squints against them. He is alone, abandoned, betrayed. He stops, shakes his head. From behind a rubbish pile, a voice calls, imperious and infantile. The Vagrant smiles. Under a lonely gold sun, a small group travels. Night is close. The red sun has already swung beneath the horizon, making way for eager stars. Harm speaks, too low to discern, soothing the creature in his arms. Exhausted, the Vagrant walks alongside, pulled in jerks by a tyrannical goat making the most of fortune's reversal. Verdigris fades easily from sight and memory, and the four walk in the last of the light, beyond the usurper's reach, northward, towards Wonderland and Slake, jewels in the crown uncivil. Mountains line up either side of the valley, standing watch. Their stone faces are pockmarked with caves, a mix of homes, tunnels, and traps for the unwary. In their shadow, travellers rest. 2 are awake, alert with hunger. 2 sleep. Harm stares at the man and baby, sees the tiny hand making a bed in the larger one, snuggling under a thumb-made blanket. He drinks in the sight, barely blinking. In turn, he is watched by the goat. Both watchers appear guilty. Ignored in the chaos of recent times, the goat has her leash in her mouth and chews towards freedom. She does not care about the angst lines on the green-eyed man's face. The sky begins to yawn lighter. A small foot twitches. The baby is awake. The baby is hungry. To the baby, this is unacceptable. Pink lips open, and a small chest rises, doubling in size. "Shh," says Harm, shuffling forward on his knees until he is leaning over them. Urge to yell forgotten, the baby stares up at him.
"It's all right,"
he says softly, reaching down. The baby's expression says otherwise. With the utmost care, Harm takes the Vagrant's hand, turning it, releasing the baby from its grip. Amber eyes snap open. The Vagrant jerks up, catching Harm's wrist in steely fingers, his hand reaching for the sword, muscles preparing for violence. The baby holds its breath. The goat drops the leash from its teeth, assuming an expression of nonchalance. Harm's voice is strained.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shock you. Please, can you let me go? You're hurting me."
The vagrant's gaze travels down from Harm's face, along the man's twisted arm to his own fingers. His eyebrows lift in surprise. He lets go. Both men look away. Small eyes flick between them. The baby is still hungry. It does not intend to suffer alone.
"Sorry to wake you,"
Harm says softly. The vagrant holds up a hand and makes a dismissive gesture. A loud cry from the baby stirs the other three into action, and milk travels quickly from goat to tin to hungry mouth. For a time there is peace, and a golden sun lifts itself over the shoulders of the mountains.
"I know you're tired, but we should go."
The vagrant nods, handing the baby over to Harm and picking up the leash. He does not notice the tooth marks. Travelling north, they look back often. The blasted lands stare back, dusty and worn. They see no pursuers. Harm's voice prods the silence gently, appeasing the baby, making one-way conversation. Shadows recline and split as the second sun rises. The redness catches in dark smudges under the vagrant's eyes, like angry bruises.
"Can I ask you something?"
The vagrant nods.
"We need supplies and shelter. Do you have a plan?"
Harm glances over, rubbing his wrist.
"I know a place we can go, but we'll need something to trade. All I have are the clothes on my back. That is, if you want me to stay with you."
The vagrant stops walking, his face creasing in thought.
"I'd understand if you don't trust me, but if you'll have me, I'll come with you."
He reaches out a hand. The movement pulls back his sleeve, revealing red stripes recently made. The vagrant tenses as he steps closer.
"I haven't always done the right thing. I have the feeling you understand what that's like."
Harm's fingers brush against the vagrant's arm, daring only the briefest touch. His voice is soft, barely a whisper.
"You don't have to be alone."
A sorrow-woven smile touches the vagrant's lips. He nods once, firmly, and walks on faster than before.
"Thank you."
Harm pauses, unwilling to break the moment.
"Do you have a plan?"
The vagrant points north.
"And a way to get food?"
Slipping his free hand into a pocket, the vagrant produces a coin, pure and silver. Harm's fingers twitch, drawn to the singing metal.
"That's good, but it's a long way from here to the next settlement."
The vagrant frowns, but keeps walking.
"As I said, I know a place we could go. It's not much of a detour, and we could get everything we need. What do you think?"
The vagrant nods, though the frown remains in place.
"Then please follow me."
They walk for a while in a silence Harm finds unbearable.
"Can I ask you something?"
The vagrant nods.
"Are you able to talk?"
The vagrant looks up at the sky as if seeking inspiration. None comes. He shakes his head.
"I'm sorry. I hope I didn't embarrass you."
After a pause, he speaks again, papering over the awkwardness.
"They call me Harm. Everyone ended up being given a name when they joined the rebels. It wasn't official or anything. We called each other all kinds of things, but for me, Harm was what stuck. I hated it at first. The name seemed too scary for a man my size. It felt like a joke. Joe used to call me Harmless, bastard. But I'd been called worse before, so I got used to it. It's funny what becomes normal after a while.
He clears his throat, self-conscious.
I thought you might want to know a bit about me, seeing as we're travelling together.
The vagrant gestures for him to continue.
I grew up in one of the tethered towns outside Wonderland, and like most people, I didn't really understand what was happening when the uncivil took the city. My mother and my uncle were machinists, and we were comfortable. Not rich, but we didn't want for anything. They'd done well under the Empire, and we were loyal to the teachings of the Winged Eye. When the uncivil came, they refused to accept her and tried to encourage others to stand firm and not be tempted by her gifts. It was a bad business decision. The old infrastructure in the city was already failing, and the uncivil had solutions to our problems. She didn't attack my family. Didn't need to. She just waited while they became obsolete. I tried to tell them to join her cults, but they were stubborn. I kept saying that the Seven would send their Seraph Knights one day, and that on that day their loyalty would be rewarded. As far as I know, they're still saying that. I travelled into the city and started work, doing odd jobs, whatever I could scrounge. It wasn't easy, it wasn't always clean, and the pay was crap. In the end, I did what everyone else was doing and went to the uncivil.
As the vagrant raises an eyebrow, he raises his hand.
Don't worry, it didn't work out. Actually, I had to leave Wonderland in a bit of a hurry, but that's another story. I'm sorry, didn't mean to give you my whole life history.
The vagrant's smirk is not without warmth.
Funny to think they were right. My family, I mean. I assume that's why we're going north, to rendezvous with the others.
He looks at the vagrant for confirmation, and his face falls.
There are no others, are there?
The vagrant shakes his head.
Oh. Then we're not going north to attack, we're going to escape. Maybe I will be able to help you after all. I've had a lot of experience of running away. I also had a lot of younger sisters, so I'm no stranger to handling babies either. The goat's all yours, though.
Taking the green-eyed man's lead, the group make their way towards a gap in the mountainside, a jagged alcove where things watch and wait. The Knights of Jade and Ash dig among the corpses of the no longer half alive. They work quickly, untroubled by darkness. Between them, the commander's body is raised from bloody mulch and placed on the ground. Lovingly, they peel and scrape charred chunks from their leader's armor. One retrieves the commander's sword, offering the hilt. But the commander does not move. The knights form a circle around him and kneel, leaning forward till their heads touch. Essence flows between them, swirling downward, reaching into the dulled space within the commander's visor. Deep within the shell, they find the commander's essence, ragged and pale, a spiderweb afterglow of what was. Together, the knights cradle the fragmented cloud, repainting its edges, filling the spaces with portions of their own souls, remaking. Panic slides between them, gaining speed and power. The knights are so close, they struggle to know which of them began to doubt. All of them feed it, making it grow, till they tremor with its force.
Broken. The circle is broken. Leaking. We bleed from
Gloom threatens to overwhelm them. Then there is a spark, ignited within their shared conscious, and the commander's thoughts take form, bringing order. Report! We have defeated the uncivil servants. The malice is gone. We are afraid. The sixth has fallen. And Patchwork, trapped by your fire. Patchwork lies in the rocks nearby. It lives. It dies. Take me there. There is more, should we say. We don't know. We are afraid. Tell me. The rebels' fire brought down the rocks behind us. We are trapped. We cannot follow the malice. We have failed. The commander has lost 2 knights, and a fear wound has spread through the others. Its lance is broken, one gauntlet ruined, unusable save as a club. It does not matter. The commander breaks contact and picks up its sword. The knights help their leader to where Patchwork expires, a half-buried mash of robe and bone, flopping obscenely. With a cry, the commander's sword drives down, piercing, pinning the exposed limb tight. The commander waits patiently, allowing the enemy's strength to fade. As the Uncivil's Duke begins to fragment, the commander enters its fraying mind, rifling. New realizations come. The bulk of the Uncivil's power has been spent in the tunnels. Verdigris is, for the moment, masterless. The Uncivil endures despite her distance from the breach. Her aim is set still further north, where war rages between her armies. The Uncivil has armies, and the Empire's forces that still hold the coast. She fears to face the usurper, is fleeing its reach. She knows it cannot travel. She knows. The commander sways with the idea. Somewhere it knows this too, has always known. But she is wrong. The usurper can reach this far north. They will be the fingers of Amag, the fist of the green sun. But first they must escape. The Knights of Jade and Ash shift rocks, tunneling while the commander flays the remnants of Patchwork, sometimes Duke, Southern Eye of the Uncivil. Both jobs take a long time. There are those who live between Slake and Verdigris, secret groups hiding in the gaps. Like most small things, they survive through stealth and solitude. Sometimes, however, the need for trade, for stories, or for the sharing of despair brings them together. At these times, a shadow market is convened.
The shadow market has rules,
explains Harm as the vagrant takes the baby back within the confines of his coat.
Never give anyone your name, never draw a weapon, never show your face, never go back.
Hooded figures sit behind piles of wares, haggling, exchanging. Banter is curt, as hard as the survivors. Figures come and go, flitting between the traders, moth-like, taking turns to watch for intruders. They enter, and the sword vibrates against the vagrant's leg, hums stifled within its sheath. He hastens to the first stall. The owner's face is hidden. Only glimpses of her skin are seen, tough, wrinkled, like a dried nut. She guards her thin produce jealously, and the vagrant wants all of it. She, in turn, wants all of his coins. The goat edges towards the food, getting closer, saliva building at the corner of her mouth. Her nose hovers over it, then descends, encountering a hand, slapping, fast. The owner's words turn sharp, as do the vagrant's gestures.
"Please," says Harm. "We all suffer if we can't agree on a fair price."
He talks further, soothing, understanding of the woman's troubles. Her defences are up, however, and his fight to lower them is long. Unfortunately, neither Harm nor the owner of the goods have the luxury of time. Shade falls across the shadow market, a false sunset. As one, they look up. The mountain above seems to have grown taller, its blunted head blocking the light. But mountains do not grow, nor do they move. This one jumps. Chunks of rock break away from the descending shape as it falls, spreading arms and legs. The ground screams as the living comet makes contact. A ripple of stone and sound booms outward, scattering people, redistributing wealth. Light returns, dazzling, revealing green skin, laced purple with veins rope thick. Metal plates meant for tanks cover her body, worn so long the flesh grows over them like ivy. Only her face appears normal, sitting too small in the triangle of muscle between shoulders and forehead. She is called Usurper's Daughter. She is called the Hammer that Walks, and she is looking for someone. She stays in her landing crouch, poised. Only her head moves, sweeping left and right. People scream and scrabble, trapped between the new arrival and the mountainside. A few cower. Most begin to climb. None think to fight. Harm grabs at the cloth by his feet, pulling up the corners to make a sack bulging with food. The owner shrieks, rising from the floor onto her knees, clawing for her possessions. Harm pushes her backwards and runs, making for a small opening in the rock wall. The vagrant glares at his retreating back, but goes to follow, pauses, and looks once more to the woman sprawled in the dust, defeated. He tosses a precious coin. It flies towards her, spinning, singing, and lands in her lap. The hammer's head tracks the movement, then reverses the action until her gaze settles on the vagrant. She stands up. Vagrant and goat race for the cave. The goat is first and squeezes swiftly into the dark. The hammer leaps. The vagrant forces forward into the crack. It does not want him. Stones grate against his back, pressing hard on his ribs. The baby's cries go high-pitched with pain, but he is through. The hammer strikes the wall where her prey has hidden, and keeps striking until the mountain sheds slabs of granite, sealing all within. 8 years ago. While the infernal horde spread northward, hunting for the malice, the usurper attends to its new home. Life draws it. From the smallest blades of grass to the wild networks of weeds and vines, jostling for space. It is a conflict the usurper can understand. Of more interest is the town that sprawls before the great infernal. Tucked away at the base of a valley, it has been spared the attention of the other invaders. Turbines still turn, and lights continue to illuminate. Rows of solar panels run across the valley's sides, synthetic palms tilting upwards to catch the last of the day's sun's light. And there are people. They form a shaky line at the town's border. Men and women too old or too young to join the army. In 2 gliding bounds, the usurper stands before them. They flinch back, most raising their makeshift weapons, a few dropping them. The usurper scoops up one of the youngest, turning him slowly in a massive hand. Though desperate to help their dangling companion, the trembling humans gaze upon the usurper, unsure of what to do. One brave soul rushes forward, firing her weapon, bellowing a challenge. But bullets only glance off the usurper's silver-green skin, and words make even less impact. The brave soul stops advancing, stops being brave. The usurper does not notice. Its attention is held by something much more interesting. Unseen by human eyes, the usurper is surrounded by a moat of infernal essence, the broken-down remains of its kin that failed to manifest properly in the world. Wherever the usurper steps is tainted by this essence, changed in some way, and now the same begins to happen to the young boy in the usurper's hand. Mortal essence is distorted by the infernal, swelling within the young body. It becomes larger but less subtle, stronger and more volatile. And as the essence within shifts, so too does the physical body. Skin takes on a greenish hue, muscles bunch and grow, limbs stretch. The boy screams, his voice already a few octaves lower than it was moments ago. By the time the transformation is complete, the suns have set, and the other humans are long gone. The usurper drops the body in the dirt and advances on the town. It leaves behind a half-breed, no longer fully human, but not a true infernal either, the first of the usurper kin. The town is quiet, most people wisely having hidden or fled. But the usurper's senses go beyond the physical, and it moves quickly to a house, sensing an abundance of life somewhere just under the ground. Clever design has hidden the trapdoor well, and the usurper quickly loses patience. It drives its clawed hands through the floor and makes its own hole, peeling back the sides until it is large enough. Small mortals cluster together, their eyes wide with terror as the usurper drops in among them. The youngest of the town are hidden here, from babies swathed in protective bubbles to boys and girls ranging from 2 to 8 years old. So many humans, so fresh, so malleable and full of potential. If it were human, the usurper would smile. They shriek as it chases them, like a sinister game of tag. With each contact, a new set of transformations begin, and another usurperkin is made. One of the girls does not run, however. Barely 4 years old, and small for her age, she is no stranger to threats, or to violence. The usurper stops in front of her, fascinated by the fiery spirit within the tiny body. It jerks forward, trying to scare her. In answer, the girl bears an incomplete set of teeth. Looking at her, the usurper recognizes something of itself, an inability to flee, and an unwillingness to back down no matter the size of the opponent. Though she cannot hope to win, she would rather fight and die. It approves. More than with the others, the usurper makes sure to imprint something of itself upon the girl. She fights, of course, just as the usurper would if the positions were reversed. But there can be only one outcome. When it is finished, the girl from before has gone, and in her place is a monster shaped in the usurper's image, a tool to smash its enemies, a hammer that walks. Breath labours in the dark. A baby cries, pain-pitched, shocked, unbearable. Only 6 people and a goat make it inside before the hammer seals the entrance. One of them knows the cave well, can navigate through crawlways on memory alone. He has already gone. 2 others follow him, losing first the trail, then their way. Sanity will be the next to evade them. The vagrant sits against the rock, content to be still. He hears the sound of sniffing, then eating, and Harm's voice reprimanding. The baby is clamped to his side, clenched fists making handles in his clothes. He rocks it until the screams go hoarse, then fade to sleep. Something moves, unseen in the blackness, nudging the vagrant's hip. Reflexively, his hand grabs it, snaring a bone, stick-thin, wrapped in a single layer of paper flesh. A vein presses against his thumb, then retreats, then dances forward again to a thready beat. The vagrant works his hand along the leg, drawing the outline with his fingertips. They skate over the back of a knee, a hamstring, a buttock. But as they pass the hip bone, flesh yields, wet and warm. The vagrant lowers his head, returning his hand to the stranger's ankle. Time slips by, unnoticed. When the pulse has made its final retreat, the vagrant slides himself along the wall until he can find the man's face with his hand. Gently, he smooths out the wrinkles of pain, closing the stranger's eyes against the dark. Then he searches the body. In return for his kindness, it offers little. A chunk of biscuit baked brick hard, a small tube of unknown liquid, and a handful of gems, tiny and sharp. He pockets them all. Harm's voice sends ripples through the silence.
Are you all right? Kick once for yes, twice for no.
The vagrant kicks once, then once more.
Are you injured?
2 kicks.
Stuck?
2 kicks.
Something else?
A kick.
Do you need help?
A pause. 1 kick, then 2.
Sorry, I don't understand. I've tried moving these rocks, but they're stuck fast. The others have gone, so there must be a way out. Are you ready to go?
2 kicks.
Oh.
Harm talks on, wondering about what to do, where to go, and if they will be able to get out. Eventually he notices the vagrant has stopped kicking, and the goat has stopped trying to bite him. He asks another question. Nobody answers. They are too busy sleeping. On the far side of the mountains, a man emerges from a cave, peering left and right before sneaking into the night. He is unremarkable. Not the one. The hammer that walks lets him go. It is within reach. She feels it. hidden nearby. Hatred swells within her, and something else, a memory of dissonant beauty that demands attention. In her mind she sees the shadow market, the squealing rabble, all noisy sacks of fear. Pathetic. But then, amid it all, there is the coin singing through the air. Captivating. Beautiful. Able to bear it no longer, she begins to climb. The ragged woman is easy to find, her shack only hidden from the ground. Like all the unblessed, she is slow and predictable. Believing herself alone, the old woman examines the coin, dancing it across her fingers. It winks invitingly at the giant usurperkin. With one blow, the hammer changes her. Bones crack and fall, forming a humble pile of sticks. The hammer digs out the coin and throws it, head tilting back as it ascends and down as it thunks against her hand. It does not turn or trill for her. Disappointed fingers curl around the silver disc. She holds it close like a mother and returns to her post. Waiting. Stone still. Chapter 15. The vagrant sits up. His muscles compete for stiffness, tingling awake, complaining. At his side, the body is cold. He kicks out, finding his companions in the dark.
"Welcome back,"
says Harm dryly.
"Are you ready to go now?"
He kicks once, and they go, feeling their way on hands and knees until they find the back of the cave where two circular tunnels sit side by side, empty eye sockets waiting to be filled.
"Which way?"
The vagrant shrugs, disturbing the baby, who resettles against his side, grumbling. Harm takes them through the left passage. The rock is smooth beneath their knees, stroking their backs with gentle undulations. In places there are holes, fist-sized, randomly scattered. A smell issues from them, pungent with life. The passage takes them deeper, sloping down until their crawl becomes a shuffling descent. Muffled sounds drift towards them, like men humming through a gag. Harm is the first to find them. Two figures quiver with fear, wrapped side by side in a film of softly glowing fungus. The sight startles him, and he slides closer, involuntarily, lurching forward with both hands. Palms squelch against wetness that adheres to his skin. He pulls one hand away and feels resistance, strands of sweaty web tethering him to the other men.
"I need help,"
he hisses. The men hear his voice and try to answer, blowing fear-thick bubbles in the living wrap. Their struggles shake the fungus, sending tremors along its surface.
"I'm stuck. Help me!"
The vagrant works his way down, juggling his burdens. A new sound can be heard from the fist-sized holes, hundreds of tiny fingernails drumming on stone, closing quickly. Harm pulls against his bonds. They stretch, but do not break, holding him fast.
"Hurry, please!"
Sword in hand, the vagrant arrives at Harm's side. He slices down, locating the strands by their soft light. They release the green-eyed man, snagging the blade instead. The vagrant twists the sword, trying to free it. From holes by his feet, above his head, and by his shoulders, things scuttle. They sound like severed hands, long-nailed, moving with alien purpose. Fortunately, it is too dark to see their true form. Harm propels himself back up the tunnel, but his escape is blocked by the goat. She is stuck. She cannot climb backwards, cannot turn round, will not go forward. A cork in a bottle, scared and angry. Silvered wings twitch at the sword's hilt, and smoke plumes upwards where fungus and steel touch. The vagrant is free. He jumps back, shapes falling around him, bumping against his elbow, rolling over his boots. He jumps back again, head knocking against low stone. The crawlers do not follow, swarming instead for the trapped men, who are forced to wait, trembling. He looks away quickly and joins the others. Behind him the fungal glow dims, blotted out by a blanket of nightmares. Harm grabs at his shoulder.
"We're trapped!"
The vagrant shrugs off his hand, sheathes the sword. He passes the baby over and climbs past Harm to the trembling goat. He does not need to see to know her expression. Taking a deep breath, he finds her shoulders with his hands and pushes. The going is slow, every inch painful. Limbs already taxed to their limits burn with outrage at this new demand. The goat's teeth snap the air, catching the vagrant's ear on the third attempt. Bleating, bleeding, crying, they tumble from the tunnel back into the original cave. This time, Harm takes the right tunnel. Like the previous passage, this too has been made by a wild burrow moor. It takes them on a gentle curve to the right. The vagrant runs his hand along the walls as he crawls, checking for holes. Ahead, a splinter of red light shines from a crack in the ceiling. It is fresh made by the hammer's assault, dust forming miniature mountain ranges on the floor beneath. They follow it gratefully, and it widens, rewarding them with a view of the sky.
"Let's climb out here,"
says Harm.
"These tunnels will kill us."
The vagrant agrees. It is a short and brutal journey. The two men manage the climb with grunting ease, passing between them the baby, who contemplates sky and suns and other unknowable things. They pull up the goat with a rope. She sways slowly, comments rarely, dark eyes seething, planning revenge. When all are safely out, Harm, baby, and vagrant lie side by side, fatigue plastering them to the fat ledge. Only one of them moves, stretching for the sky itself. Clouds delight and slip through fingers, an endless parade of gods and monsters. The vagrant watches the little head, flitting left and right, enraptured. He sees a patch of skin, reddened and raised through the downy black hair. The vagrant closes his eyes, pinches the bridge of his nose. His lips move, cursing himself. He bends down, planting the softest of kisses on the baby's head. When the sun's set, the group huddles together for warmth. Harm opens up the stolen sack, sharing the joyless food inside. Reluctantly, the vagrant accepts. He frowns as he eats.
"You don't agree with what I did,"
says Harm. It is not a question.
I'm sorry, but we didn't have much time. If I hadn't taken her things, we'd be starving now.
The vagrant shrugs.
Tell me, why are they following you? What do you have that they want so badly?
He looks from baby to sword to the vagrant, weighing each one. Tired amber meets soft green, then breaks away.
It's your sword. You must be the only seraph knight left this side of the Southern Sea. It's a symbol. No, more than that. Is it alive? I swear it watches me sometimes.
Both men glance at the sword, inert in its scabbard, and Harm is suddenly eager to change the subject.
Can I ask you a personal question?
This time, the shrug is wary.
Your baby, does she have a name?
Lines appear on the vagrant's face, sorrowful, adding years. His mouth opens, closes again. He begins to nod, shakes his head. Defeated, he covers his head with his hands.
Everyone should have a name,
says Harm softly.
Perhaps I could help you choose one.
The vagrant gives no sign of having heard. Harm leans over the baby, distracting it from the stars that sparkle, too distant.
Let us see if we can find a name that you like. Let me know if any of these work for you. Seren? Baylis? Leonie? Any thoughts?
Eyes wide, the baby waves its tongue in a circle, from nose to chin and back again. More names are offered. The baby seems unmoved. Eventually, the goat falls asleep. Green eyes glint.
What about Vesper?
Hands fall from the vagrant's face, revealing disbelief, naked, shocked. The baby blinks, drool running past its chin.
I'll take that as a yes.
He shakes the baby's hand, eliciting a long, gurgling noise.
Pleased to meet you, Vesper. I'm Harm.
8 years ago. The infernal horde surges north under the usurper's order. A river of essence surrounds them, made of those that were too big or too unfortunate to find a host body, who lost integrity and blended with other unfortunates into a single unconscious, a soup of blood and failure. Known as the taint, it flows around the horde's feet, around claws and other less recognizable limbs as they thunder across the landscape. Where it touches native plants and creatures, it infuses them with infernal essence, changing them, corrupting and enhancing, sowing a path of half-bred corruption in its wake. In time, the strongest of these mutations will spread far, shattering an already troubled ecosystem. The suns glare down at the horde, slowly eroding dead shells and making smoke dance where essence is exposed. From a distance, individual horrors blend into one mass, their shapes blurred within the taint, indefinable, maddening. Over time, however, patterns emerge. Greater infernals that collect lesser terrors in their orbit, all bound to the usurper, all seeking Gamma's fallen sword, the malice. At their head is the uncivil, Unlike the others, she does not inhabit a single host body, instead wrapping her essence in a cloak of corpses. Unlike the others, she has space for thoughts of her own, of rebellion. She cannot disobey the usurper. Its majesty is stamped within her core, indelible. But its orders are simple, given in haste and pain. Pursue the malice. Destroy it. The uncivil dares to dream that perhaps, there is room for other things too. Her own desires bubble close to the surface, unformed and insistent, like a child's, more emotion than direction. She wishes for independence. She does not yet care how she spends it. Each time the horde passes through a settlement, a peace breaks away. The lesser infernals are easily distracted, always hungry. The stronger ones see opportunities for better shells, and some wonder if perhaps the malice is hidden somewhere among the squealing, pink-faced mortals. Always the uncivil presses on, overtly pursuing the malice, secretly running from the usurper. As distance and flesh is devoured, the uncivil begins to notice something. The horde is slowing down. Little by little, she begins to stretch ahead of the others. When they reach the city of Horizon, the horde breaks on its gates like a wave on the cliffs. For the first time since the Battle of the Red Wave, resistance is met. Horizon has its own skyship, along with a ragtag reserve of defenders. Neither these nor the gates stop the horde for long. The skyship is overrun and sent plunging into the streets. The defenders are shredded, pushed aside, as are the gates. In the end, it is the city of Horizon itself that stops the horde's advance. There are too many lights, too many temptations. Overwhelmed by possibility, a full third of the invading force is sucked up within Horizon's pores. The uncivil presses on with the remaining army, trailing flames and mortal screams. Here, the land opens up. There is no obvious way on, no path to follow. The horde begins to falter. The further they go from the sanctity of the breach, the more sluggish the taint becomes, thinning at their feet. Comfort is but a memory now, each step taking them deeper into a place that neither wants nor needs them. Soon the uncivil leaves them behind, fragmenting, poisoning. Though the usurper's orders remain a constant looping through her, pursue the malice, destroy it, she is able to notice other things. The shape of a flower, open, that pleases her. The call of a bird that does not. Away from the other infernals, she has space to breathe, to be. This too pleases her. Time and travel begin to take their toll. Her cloak of corpses starts to break down. Dead flesh flakes away, old tendons wear thin, and cracks appear in bonded bones. The uncivil diverts from her course, seeking fresh material for her shell. She soon finds them. A group of mortal children stand together, curled hands joining them. They skip round each other, a bouncing, singing circle. Earnest frowns testify to their effort.
The eye is in the circle, the wings surround the circle. They watch you, they judge you, we all bow down.
The words mean nothing to the uncivil, though she does not like the way the song gathers their essence, threatening to join them into something greater, terrifying. The uncivil pauses, preparing for flight. But the song is just a song, a misremembered echo of something lost long ago. Skipping slows, voices quieten. The song has no hold on their essence. From within her cloak, the uncivil extends half of a ribcage, mounted on a thick cable of femurs. The limb is a mockery, more rake than hand. She begins to spin, going faster and faster, until the teeth that stud her shell rattle like 1,000 broken bells, dull and dolorous. Song forgotten, the children fall to making sounds of simpler, more primal communications. Rolling between them swiftly, harvesting, the uncivil quietens them. Bodies fall, one by one, until silence descends. The wind stops, aghast as the uncivil prepares to assimilate the bodies. But there is a problem. As the uncivil parts her cloak to make space for the new corpses, pain drives in through the gap. This far north, the very air is hostile. Where it touches her, essence fragments. Sealing the cloak once more, the uncivil sits and broods. She needs help. She cannot survive this far north for long, but dares not return south for fear of falling further under the usurper's power. A noise disturbs her. One of the children is not dead. She rolls herself to the source of the sound to examine the child in more detail. A neck twitches, muscles responding to half-formed impulses. The uncivil extends her limb once more, matching it to the dozen holes recently made in the child's side, and presses in. Safely under the quivering flesh, the uncivil extends her essence. The child's own essence is weak and strange, hard, fixed, limited. The uncivil rolls it around like a marble in the mouth, tasting. She reads many things there: fear, anger, bitterness, the desire to live. Familiar things. A plan begins to form. The child dies. The uncivil gathers the bodies with her bone rake and rolls on. The next mortal the uncivil meets is an old man. They talk. She gives him a new leg, powered by a shred of her essence, linked by threads to his. In return, he helps add the children's corpses to her shell. They continue north together. Soon others join them. Her gifts eventually fail, but the uncivil is always happy to repair her faithful, and they, in turn, are happy to maintain her. The usurper's orders are still followed. She remains alert for the malice. But in the main, the hunt is given over to her agents, making room for her own plans, making room for rebellion. They set off early, making their slow way down the mountainside. The vagrant lags often, the goat dragging him along gleefully. By mid-morning, they are on solid ground, plodding north. Several miles behind, a mountaintop moves, detaching itself, a weighty shadow, bounding and sliding in pursuit. Landing, it breaks into a run, swallowing the distance between it and the unsuspecting group. Even far away, it appears large. They only have to turn to see it. They do not.
Have you ever been to Slake before?
Asks Harm. The vagrant shakes his head.
I've not either, but I've heard some very bad things. Even so, it would be better if we got supplies in Slake and miss out Wonderland altogether. I was there a few years ago.
His voice drops to a mutter.
It's a long story.
The vagrant nudges him.
It's too dangerous for us. Babies are in demand there, and it's virtually impossible to hide. They say the uncivil knows everything that happens within its walls. A man once swore to me that if you stay too long, she eats your dreams.
The vagrant raises an eyebrow.
I know it's not true.
The unexpected sound stops both men dead. They look at each other, then slowly turn to the innocent-looking bundle in Harm's arms. Amazed smiles shine on the baby's upturned face.
Seems she knows it too,
says Vesper.
Yes, good, very good. What else can you say? Can you say Harm? That'll do for now.
Harm leans closer, whispering in Vesper's ear.
I'm glad you've decided to pitch in. It takes the pressure off me.
The vagrant takes Vesper under the arms, throwing her high and catching her. Happy squeals rise and fall several times, voicing approval, wanting more. On the fourth throw, the sword joins in, humming along. Frowning, the vagrant looks back. The hammer that walks is close now, each blink making her double in size. They are in open ground, exposed and without sanctuary, and they are tired. There is little to do. Harm takes back the baby, who begins to cry. The vagrant draws the sword, holding it forward, ready. He glances over at the green-eyed man, mouthing a message.
Leave you again? I don't know.
The glance becomes a glare, but they are out of time. The hammer arrives, legs drumming the ground, storming towards the vagrant. The sword's tip bows forward, pointing towards the hammer's chest. 10 great strides separate them, then 9, 8, 7, 6, and she jumps high, higher over the vagrant's head, defying gravity, a sky-scraping tank. Sword and vagrant watch the giant shadows sail past, agog. She lands behind him, pressing forward towards an open-mouthed goat. Harm finds he can run after all, urged along by the leash on his wrist. He might as well race the wind. The hammer skids up behind him, ploughing a wave of dust. She taps the back of his legs lightly with a steel-clad foot, cracking bone. Harm blacks out, falls, the baby spilling from his arms. The goat keeps going, dragging the green-eyed man behind her. Fatigue forgotten, the vagrant races after, sword building to a roar. His strike lands on the hammer's raised forearm, shield broad. Light flashes blue, blackening the hammer's bracer. With her other hand she smacks the flat of the sword side on, ripping it from the vagrant's grip. The blade spins through the air, eye rolling in fury, impotent. It clatters to the ground 10 feet away. Unarmed, the vagrant squares up to his opponent. Next to her towering form, he looks like a child. Taking a deep breath, he raises his fists, managing to dodge the first sweep of her arm. The second takes him by the throat, lifting him up and up until their eyes draw level. He cannot break her hold. He tries anyway, pulling till veins bulge. She squeezes and holds his gaze until amber eyes close and arms droop. Satisfied, the hammer slings the vagrant over her shoulder and collects the sword. Ignoring the bubbling hiss of metal and sudden warmth on her gauntlet, she marches south, back towards the mountains, taking her prize to the usurper. Chapter 16. The goat pulls frantically, backing away as fast as she can. Death is coming, angry and quick. She must escape. Her legs scrabble in the dust, working for every inch of ground. It is impossible. The man tied to her is too heavy. She bleats with fear and venom. Nearby, the baby cries. The goat flicks her ears in annoyance, but no other sounds are apparent, and she has not been eaten. She looks up. The big death is leaving, taking that man with it. She watches it go, head on one side, waiting until they are small shapes far away. Then, with uncharacteristic energy, she snaps up her leash and chews, and chews, and chews. The vagrant twitches, his face a dreaming mask, tormented. Eyes fly open, and he sucks in a breath. Above, two suns dance slowly round each other, glimpsed in gaps between clouds. It is afternoon. He brings 2 fingers to his neck, gingerly touching reddened skin. About his legs snakes a length of broken pipe, made string in the hammer's fingers, and tied in a crude knot. His captor squats nearby, hunched forward, hiding something from sight. The vagrant pushes up onto his elbows, looks about. The ledge appears much like the one he recently rested on. He and the hammer are alone. There is no sign or sound of Vesper or harm, or even the goat. He closes his eyes, covering his face with quick hands to hide the trembling. 3 slow breaths come and go, then hands lower, revealing features firm, resigned. He tries to pull the pipe from his legs, but the metal has recovered from the hammer's molestations and refuses to budge. Then he spies the sword. It lies next to the hammer, smoking with rage. Its hilt points towards the vagrant. He rolls onto his front, using his elbows to inch forward. Each drag of his body over rough stone sounds like an avalanche, each breath a declaration of intent. The hammer remains distracted. She does not hear or does not care. He sees now that she attends to something small. With a stifled grunt, he pushes himself up on his palms, stretching to see over the wall of her thigh. A coin sits like a star in the night of her palm. She throws it awkwardly, and it lands, clunking, dull. Her great shoulders sag. The vagrant edges to the sword. Lowering his body to the ground, he stretches for it. Fingertips brush the hilt. The hammer twists round. The vagrant closes his eyes. He feels something grasp the back of his coat, and then he is moving, skidding on his chest. The hammer leaps after him, grabbing him one-fisted, pressing him against the mountainside. His bound legs swing together, useless, tapping on armoured thighs. Snarling with rage, the hammer curls her fingers tight and pulls back to strike. The vagrant raises a hand in front of his face. In it, he holds a coin. The hammer's blow freezes in the air. Wheezing, the vagrant tosses the coin. For him, it sings. Silver light dances in the hammer's eyes, and anger melts from her face, forgotten. He catches, tosses it again, and she watches, enraptured. Oxygen-starved hands fumble the catch. As one, they look at the fallen coin, then back at each other. The vagrant swallows. The hammer's head turns, indicating her ready fist, then goes back to the vagrant. She uncurls her fingers and lowers him to the ground, releasing her grip on his chest. She towers over him as he gasps in air, then picks up the coin and drops it into his open hand. He looks up at her. Her voice is gravel spinning in a bin.
More!
Nodding slowly, he tosses the coin again. At the sound, tension falls from her. She sits opposite the vagrant, eyes only on spinning silver.
More!
Time passes, and the coin leaps up, again and again. The hammer takes her own coin and tries to mirror the man before her, but her thick, metal-clad fingers are unequal to the task. She roars with anger. The vagrant stops. She notices immediately.
More!
The vagrant shakes his head.
More!
The vagrant points to the pipe binding his feet. The hammer raises her fist.
More!
The vagrant shakes his head. Her blow drives sense from his world, and for a time the vagrant dreams, restless. He wakes up to an eye swollen shut, and a gap where a tooth once sat. The pipe is gone from his legs. The hammer leans over him.
More!
He nods. The coin dances 3 times, then stops. The hammer's small eyes narrow.
More!
He beckons her closer. She comes. He points to her coin. Puzzled, she lifts her hand to him, open, disk shining on her outstretched fingers. He nods and taps his own coin against it. Reunited, the Silver Sisters sing. The duet haunts the ears, stirring regrets and things lost. When it ends, the vagrant puts his coin into her other hand. Her eyes glisten, water growing at their edges.
Mine!
The vagrant nods. She smiles, a girlish expression sketched from monstrous jaws, and touches one to the other. Together, they sing for her. The vagrant risks standing up. There is no retaliation. He walks to where the sword lies, glances back to his captor. Her eyes are fixed on the coins, quivering beautifully in her hands. He sighs, picks up the sword. The point drifts towards the hulking figure, lining up with her neck. He walks carefully, quietly, until he stands behind her. She touches the coins together a second time, starting another song. Massive shoulders shake, and she underscores the melody with rasping sobs. The vagrant sighs again, forcing the sword back into its sheath. Wiping memories from his eyes, he turns and walks to the mountain path, beginning the long descent. In Verdigris, 2 rebels march, one on each side of the street, brother on the left, sister on the right, both usurper-kin, both full of purpose. People gather in doorways, watching them in stunned silence. At each building, the scarred giants grapple with the signs they find there and tear them down. Behind them, littering the street, banners to the uncivil and the usurper lie, united at last in the dust, trampled by the people that follow. Defiant chants fill the air. 3 streets away, lost in the cacophony, a man cries in fear. He has seen something emerge into the afternoon, something dangerous that threatens the rebels' fragile victory. He rushes to tell his neighbor, and his story grows wings, rushing ahead in a wave of whispers, carried by running feet, dashing from mouth to ear. It comes at last to a small boy who overtakes the procession, waving his hands to get the usurper-kin's attention.
Max! Maxie!
He calls. 2 scar-painted heads recognize their names. Turn. Muscles tense under green skin, hearing trouble in the boy's tone.
Tough Call needs you at the north gate right now! Bring everyone!
The boy runs off, pulling the giants and their followers with him like a black hole with dirty feet. When they reach the gate, they find a crowd blocking the way, thick and brazen, bristling with guns. They cheer a welcome. Max and Maxie cheer back. Like 2 bubbles, the groups meet, coming together, sharing borders, expanding. Weaving between the crowd, apart and apart, is a man dressed in loose and stripy robes. His voice darts to and fro, ducking under shouts and oiling over dissent. He finds a woman, seasoned by life, proud. Hiding his shark's smile, he begins.
Ah, friend, you have a most magnificent gun, I see. But what does a gun make you but a killer, no? Any fool sees you are more than that. You are one of Verdigris' true children, standing to be counted. Surely Eze finds himself before a great soldier, yes? One of Tough Call's army. But what is a soldier without a uniform? I tell you, friend, you are in luck. For Eze has with him armbands decorated with the V of the New Order. Each is sewn by rebel children born beneath the city in darkness and is of the highest quality. They come in many colors. Your choice, friend. Price? Eze could not possibly take payment. This is his honor. But there is a ring on your finger from the old order, yes? Such a thing diminishes you. Eze will take it, replace it with this fine symbol of hope. Wear it and be proud.
The exchange is quick, and the man fades away before the bitter taste can set in. Max and Maxie's heads bob above the crowd, 2 green ships in a people sea. They search for their leader, but cannot see her. A boy runs into view, arms like pistons, face like clean bone.
The Knights of Jade and Ash are coming!
He is smart, does not join the crowd, running past, becoming obscure. Max and Maxie move to the front. They turn. The sister raises her voice.
Is this our city?
Yes!
Did you fight for it?
Yes!
Will you fight again?
Yes!
And will you win?
Yes!
I said,
She bellows.
will we win?
Yes!
They shout.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
From around a corner comes the sound of clanking armour, at which the crowd's chanting falters to a murmur. A figure steps out in front of them, and a feeling of dread leaches into the waiting army. 4 more knights join the first, their armour writhing as if trying to escape its host, stretching and straining and collapsing back into shape. Endlessly. Hopelessly. The crowd's front line trembles. Guns point uncertainly toward the knights.
Hey down there!
Shouts Tough Call, leaning from a high window. The knights march on, heedless. In her only hand, the woman holds a rocket launcher. Soot clings to the filigree around the barrel.
I'd stop if I were you!
3 feet from the crowd, the knights pause. The rebels are forced to gaze at their enemies. They do not recognize their fallen champions within the pitted, breathing metal. Quietly, they despair. From her perch, Tough Call has strength to share.
That's better!
She continues.
Everyone, let them through, and somebody open the gates!
A ragged path opens, and the crowd pulls back.
Just so there's no misunderstanding, I am 100% behind you leaving Verdigris. But if you so much as threaten any of my people or try and come back, know that we will be waiting for you.
There is a pause, lengthy. The knights are fathomless, impossible to read. People begin to sweat. A gauntlet moves to grasp a warped hilt. 4 others echo the gesture.
Just give me an excuse,
says Tough Call, watching them through winged sights. Led by her example, scores of guns find their courage, clicking in salute, ready. Turning slowly, the knights take in their opponents, measuring each one. Every individual feels their images being taken, burned into alien memory. Then, swords still sheathed, the knights march from Verdigris. Tough Call punches the air, and the rebels cheer, drawing warmth from each other. They shout and laugh till the knights are tiny dolls in the distance. With a bang, the north gate closes, unable to shut out the secret dread flowering in their hearts. Chapter 17. Stones slip underfoot, under fingers. The mountain is keen to move the vagrant on. He stays upright, mostly, skating and stumbling, making his way down. At his side, the sword thrums a warning. The vagrant stops and half draws the weapon. It stares back up the mountainside. He follows the arrow of its gaze. Keeping her distance, nestled in the rocks, he sees the hammer. Amber eyes seek the sky briefly, asking hard questions. The sky does not care to answer. He continues his descent, pausing sometimes to raise the scope to his eye, scanning the flatlands below. It is a clear day, and the small round screen soon finds Harm's body, bringing it close. Vesper is next to him, hands and feet drawing circles in the air. A half smile finds its way onto the vagrant's face. He puts the scope away and heads towards the distant speck. The sword growls softly all the way. By late evening, he arrives. From his back, Harm raises a hand in greeting.
I can't believe it! You're alive!
The vagrant nods and squats next to Vesper. Toes are tickled, smiles exchanged. The vagrant sniffs the air and leans back, wrinkling his nose. Vesper giggles.
She needs a change,
Harm adds needlessly.
You'll have to do it. When you're done, can you look at my leg? I think it's broken.
The vagrant gets to work. Soiled clothes are removed. Naked legs pedal with increased vigour. The vagrant starts cleaning, then reaches for something that isn't there. He stops mid-motion. A frown dawns.
Your goat's run away,
says Harm.
And she's taken our supplies with her.
Still frowning, the vagrant removes his scarf and wraps Vesper in it.
She'll need feeding soon. We all will. Do you have a plan?
The vagrant doesn't answer, crawling over to examine Harm's leg.
How does it look?
The green-eyed man studies the silence.
Oh, isn't there anything you can do?
The vagrant presses his lips together, his face paling.
Please, help me.
Says Vesper. The vagrant gives a tiny shake of his head and shuffles backwards. Desperation and adrenaline give Harm strength. He pushes up on his elbows.
Look at me. My leg's ruined, maybe for good. Without help, I'll die out here. Please, I need you.
He trails off, eyes widening.
You didn't kill the hammer, did you?
The vagrant shakes his head.
She's followed you here.
The vagrant nods. Harm instinctively tries to flee. Pain punishes his forgetfulness, and he falls onto his back again. The hammer that walks stands in the open 100 feet away. Conflicted muscles twist in her face, mashing expressions together, while her hands make fists, uncommitted. By contrast, Vesper knows her mind. She shrieks and cries with fear. The sound soon moves up, finds comfort in the vagrant's arms, is softened by his coat. The vagrant waits, free hand brushing the sword's hilt. With neither side willing to act, time passes. The suns dip lower, stretching shadows till the vagrant's shade touches the hammer's boots. Then, without warning, she lumbers forward, her strides devouring distance, planting herself in front of the vagrant. With a creak, she bends down, a menacing cliff, bringing her face inches from his.
Why?
She rasps. The vagrant blinks surprise. She holds up her fists, opens them. Inside each sits a round, flat, silver eye.
Why?
From behind them, Harm speaks.
You want to know why he gave you the coins?
Yes!
The vagrant looks at Vesper, then less certainly at the green-eyed man. Harm answers for him.
He doesn't want to fight you. He just wants to be left alone. But you haven't come here to fight us.
The hammer's answer is more whisper than words.
No.
You're confused. I know what that's like. He did the same to me.
Harm ignores the vagrant's silent question, keeps the focus on the giant usurperkin.
I used to live in Verdigris, but I left that life behind to follow a rogue seraph and his baby. When I stop to think about it, I realise it's madness, but I don't care. This new life is many things, but it's not poison.
The hammer edges forward, passing the vagrant, drawn to Harm's words, a flame-struck moth.
Everything changed for me when I met them. It's like I was sleeping through my life, carried along by the currents, and then all of a sudden I see somebody going the other way. I didn't even know there was another way. And now I've seen it, I can't stop wondering what it might be like to live differently, to be something else. You understand? I know. I could be telling your story instead of mine. For me, it began with a simple choice. It's the same for you. You could kill us now if you wanted. I'm already crippled and he's tired, so very tired. It would be easy for you. But if you do, you'll be alone.
Thin tears spill from the hammer's eyes. They struggle over cheeks riveted in metal and die before they reach her chin. She takes the coins and tucks them behind her wrist guard. Hands free, she reaches for Harm's leg, straightening it. The injured man screams.
No,
says the hammer. It is an order. Harm bites down on his sleeve while his other hand claws at the dirt beneath, digging shallow trenches. The hammer pulls at the bracer on her left arm till rivets scream and submit. Then she drops to one knee, placing the metal across her armoured thigh. She begins to beat it with her fist, rhythmic strikes that ring out, bouncing off distant mountains. Vesper ventures a worried glance from the vagrant's armpit. Gradually, fear is replaced by curiosity, which in turn falls to hunger. A small mouth opens, expectant. The milk, however, has run away. Seeing the impending storm, the vagrant rocks the baby, but Vesper only wrinkles her nose, unimpressed. The hammer stops, grunting in satisfaction. The bracer has become a rough, unsealed tube. She places it around Harm's injured leg and squeezes it snug.
up,
She says.
I can't,
Harm replies.
it's too painful.
up,
He tries to comply, moving awkwardly into a sitting position.
up.
Demands the hammer, putting one hand around his ribs and lifting him to his feet. She grins with monolithic teeth.
Yes.
Thank you.
The vagrant offers his shoulder, and Harm throws an arm over it. Together, the two men leave. The hammer watches, wearing the posture of someone smaller, more innocent. She sees one whispering in the ear of the other, a monologue broken by occasional gasps. They stop, and the vagrant's head tilts upwards, shaking gently from left to right. The other turns back, regarding her gently. They walk on, and after a pause, she follows. 7 years ago. When the usurper hears of the uncivil's rebellion, the response is swift. Flies spread word of the green sun's displeasure, carrying the taste of bile far and wide, seeking out still loyal subjects to find and drag the uncivil back to the fallen palace. The Earmakers 3 are the first to respond. Not exactly siblings, the trio of infernals are cut from the same cloth. Hook-wielding hunters, known more for what they do after a killing than before. The uncivil waits for them in verdigris, and she is not alone. Her cult grows swiftly. New people come every day, her promises of augmentation and immortality too much to resist. The uncivil's trail is not hidden, and the Earmakers 3 follow it, through open gates and empty streets. The city's population hides away behind closed doors, or in tunnels, deep and old. They know this is a spectacle best viewed from a distance. The truly wise turn away completely, and sleep the better for it. They find her in a deserted market square. The Earmakers 3 pause as she comes into view. While the northern climate stifles them, the uncivil sits comfortably within her shell, blossoming, safe. Her cloak is thick with new sacrifices. On its surface 100 dead eyes swivel to take in her opponents, and finds them wanting. Around her, her half-alive cult gather proudly. Normally they hide their gifts between perfumed robes to disturb rather than terrify their unaltered fellows. Now they stand revealed, grafted limbs waving beneath a repulsed sky. The Earmakers 3 ready their curling hooks and stir the poisons in their neck folds. A silence gathers. The 3 spread out, trying to flank the uncivil's position. From the cloak of corpses, half of a ribcage extends, beckoning them closer. The gesture almost human, almost charming. Spindly legs carry the 3 forward, like scurrying spiders. Their hooks flash out, all 3 finding a home in the uncivil's shell. They each pull in a different direction, trying to split the cloak of corpses. 3 lines tug tight, and woven bodies creak like old boards, threatening to tear asunder. But the uncivil does not need to endure long. Her half-alive followers answer with barbs of their own. Tentacles and nature-defying limbs of alien design wrap around the Earmakers 3. For each of the infernals, the uncivil has a dozen of her own servants. The Earmakers 3 are pushed on the defensive. They try and pull their hooks free to use on the new threat, but they are held fast by the uncivil. Trapped in a web of reanimated limbs, they begin to panic. Venom spurts from their thin mouths, most of it wasted on the earth. Before they can break free, the uncivil twists, pulling them all to her. Once they are reeled in close, the cloak of corpses animates. Lone fingers, hands, jaws, all tear at the trapped infernals, while, at their backs, the cult beat and tear and twist. It is soon over, and the half-alive humans retreat, awaiting further command. The earmakers 3 remain tethered to the uncivil's shell, their bodies broken, mist leaking in wheezy clouds from multiple holes. As their essences fade, the uncivil reaches out to them, and, briefly, 4 become one.
We hate, fear, hate you. Hate, fear you. Fear, hate you. I am the uncivil, and I am free. You are neither, and never will be, and yet I give you a choice. What is this? What are these words? We don't understand. Live and die as the usurper's creatures, or exist as mine. We fear the usurper more than you. Then die. Wait. Don't be hasty. Tell us more. We are listening. Your individual essences are bound to Amag, the green sun, usurper of all. They wane. They die. I will save your scraps and bond you to each other and to me. I will give you life free of Amag's power. But slave to you, exiled like you, hunted like you. Yes, all of these. But you will continue. We accept. We do.
She takes them from the streets to a secret place, hidden from the stars. There she weaves their essences together into a patchwork, a new composite being. She gives it a body to match, with too many faces, each with too many teeth. Chapter 18. Of all the beasts and people in the line, the goat is among the smallest. This fact does not concern the goat. Despite capture, she kicks and bites anything foolish enough to get close. The trait endears her to the meat runners, who dub her Grimbeard and chuckle each time she makes a larger animal squeal. 6 people drive the caravan, a mix of ages, men and women. Shared genes and lifestyle give them a similar look. Hard-nosed, tough like weathered stone. They keep an economic pace on the way to Slake, eating only what they need, feeding their charges just enough to maintain weight. Calorie control calculated for maximum profit. The giant usurperkin overtakes them easily, planting herself between them and their destination. Cradled in the crook of her arm is a man. His green eyes are soft, if not kind.
Good morning,
he says quietly.
We've come to collect a goat.
A meat runner steps forward, thin lips cutting a smile across her cheek.
You're in luck. We've got one, untainted and full of spirit. You see her there?
Yes.
You want her?
Yes, that's the one.
What do you have to trade?
Harm pauses, keeps his voice low.
We haven't come to trade. The goat belongs to us.
I don't think so. The animal's wild. My own son found her, masterless and alone. Then he also found our possessions strapped to her back, food and trade goods. We want those too.
The meat runner turns to her son, does not like what she discovers on his face.
I'm sure we can gather and return your things, minus a little compensation for looking after them. I don't think so. It's a fair offer. More than fair.
The hammer steps forward, naturally threatening. In response, 6 people reach for concealed weapons together like slivers of the same glass.
We can protect what's ours,
shouts the son, defiant.
Good,
replies the hammer. The meat runner puts a hand on her son's arm.
Wait! Wait. We accept your terms.
A sack and a goat are brought forward, deposited in the space between parties. The hammer lifts the sack, shakes it.
more.
Meat runners confer in swift whispers, except for the son, whose voice breaks confidence with the others.
That's all there was. I swear.
More,
demands the usurper's daughter.
She's running out of patience,
Harm adds.
I suggest you give us what we want, or she'll kill you all, starting with the smallest and working up.
The meat runner is quick to appease, but her son protests.
You can't let them rob us like this.
Yes, she hisses. I can. Which of your brothers is worth your pride? Name one, and I'll fight.
No names are given, and weapons slide back into sheaths. Another sack is prepared and left with the first. Harm appraises the new offering.
Now, this is more than fair.
He notices the vagrant approaching and gentles his expression.
We were right,
He says.
they were traders, and look who we found.
He indicates the goat.
Good news for once.
The vagrant's eyes move across the people, over tight mouths and fear-pale faces, lingering on a meat runner whose fist trembles by his side. He looks back at Harm, holding his gaze till red blooms on the other man's cheeks. Vesper shifts restlessly against his side. A precious coin appears from the vagrant's pockets, instantly grabbing the hammer's attention. Ignoring her, the vagrant walks to where the meat runners stand. He takes the son's fist, unpeels, soothes with silver. Stammered thanks are acknowledged with a nod, and the vagrant takes up the goat's chain, striding away. Scooping up sacks one-handed, the hammer follows, her face shuffling between confusion and anger. When they are gone, son turns to mother, wide-eyed.
Look what he gave me. It must be worth a fortune. Yes, it is. Even more than the coin. Eh? What are you talking about, Mother? The world has always been made of hard edges, but it used to have other things too. I don't understand. You will, one day. I can keep the coin, though. He gave it to me, and I found that goat in the first place.
She sighs. Or maybe you won't. From a distance, Slake is a sprawling mass of vertical pipes, a giant cage topped by a smog canopy that chokes the sky. Day or night, the factory city is as dark as it is noisy. Protruding from the city's side is a metal umbilical running 3 miles northwest to join its prettier twin, Wonderland. Since Verdegree's uprising, few travel south of Slake, and there is nobody to bother the vagrant and his companions as they make their way past an abandoned station. Once monocars whooshed along the route, riding the metal halo that linked Slake's belt of satellite villages. The cars are gone now, cockpit carcasses stripped and guide cables taken, broken, and given new purpose. Only unwanted scraps and pieces too large to move are left behind, rusting into the landscape. Harm reclines in the hammer's arms, bouncing gently with each stride.
Where are we going? You know I'll come with you, wherever it is. I just want to know.
In answer, the vagrant points north.
Yes, but how far north? To the crag? To 6 circles? To the coast?
The vagrant's face is unreadable.
Over the sea. You're going back to the shining city.
He doesn't bother to wait for confirmation.
See?
Asks the hammer.
Yes. How to explain? Try and imagine living water that moves on its own and goes on as far as the eye can see.
The hammer scowls.
No.
All right. Can you imagine a puddle?
Yes.
Imagine a puddle so deep you can't see the ground through it. So deep you could jump into it and move around inside.
No.
Oh.
Echoes Vesper. The hammer growls, and a small head vanishes into the shadows of the vagrant's coat.
You'll understand when we get there. Some things you need to see for yourself.
He pats her shoulder plate and turns back to the vagrant.
We have enough supplies to bypass Slake, but I've never been north of Wonderland. Do you know the way?
The vagrant keeps walking.
That's not an answer.
Harm looks for support, gets none.
We need to talk about this.
The vagrant stops.
Thank you. I know this isn't easy for you, but...
Turning, the vagrant breaks into a run, passing him, arrowing for the station. His retreat starts a charge into cover. Moments later, they all hunker down in the rusted shelter, panting. The vagrant's eyes are on the sky. A swarm of shapes hang there, grey specks against the clouds. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out the scope, and looks again. A score of bone wings glide overhead, silent and sinister. The uncivil's hand is evident in their making. Each one is a rib cage, grown and splayed out. Wings of skin stretch between the curved white fingers, studded with eyeballs, dry, unblinking. They pass by without comment.
Do you think they saw us?
Harm asks as the vagrant stands up. He gets a shrug for an answer.
We need to be under cover when they come back. If we follow the old ringway, we should come across a settlement before too long.
The vagrant nods. They hurry out from the station, making the most of empty skies. The Knights of Jade and Ash travel into the Uncivil's lands unmolested. They have picked up the trail of the malice and, despite the bearer's head start, they are gaining ground. The commander finds evidence of battle near the mountains, a muddling mess of tracks firing in all directions, footprints crossing one on top of the other, making strange new shapes. From the chaos comes a line of tracks, heading north, aligned. The knights travel day and night without complaint until they are rewarded with a distant glimpse of their prey. They see the bearer, another man, and their pet, and, walking alongside them, a familiar figure, large and armoured. They are unnerved by the sight. The hammer that walks and the malice, together. The knights quiver with unspoken questions. Why does the usurper's daughter walk with their enemy? What does this mean? With a sword, one of the knights points out a flurry of shapes in the sky. Bone wings. The commander stops. The uncivil lies to the northeast in Wonderland, but the malice is taking a path to the northwest. Their primary goal remains unchanged, but now the commander knows the depth of the uncivil's rebellion, and his essence burns with rage. She must be brought to heel. The commander makes no effort to hide, setting a march toward Wonderland. Without hurry, the bone wings glide past, glassy eyes snatching reflections of the knights, keeping them. The villages blend, one seeming much like another, personalities deleted by demands from the hungry cities. Their inhabitants work hard, tending the last of the great harvester wheels, or working the crops by hand, till life blurs surreal. Those with spirit to fight have already fled, or died, or, in the case of a few, been converted by the uncivil to keep the peace. In fits and starts, the vagrant travels, pulling the goat behind him. Irregular flight patterns make the bone wings hard to predict, and several times Harm holds his breath as they pass over. Only the hammer is unaffected by the tension. They have circled a quarter of Slake's outskirts, moving anti-clockwise, away from Wonderland. So far, nothing has come for them. Neither have they been challenged. The locals are too tired, too altered to care about the strange group travelling through. The apparent lack of threat is unsettling. Without actual trouble, the mind has space to invent. Imaginary evils are conjured, behind doors, under rocks, hiding in wait just out of sight. A thick tower stands before them, heart of the next settlement. Bubbles of blown plastic stick to its side in artificially arranged growths, each one housing a family unit. Around the tower are rings of arable land, sharing sprinklers that once worked automatically. People dot the area, seeing out their shifts, docile.
"Hold on," says Harm. "Something's not right."
All turn their attention to the green-eyed man, except the goat, who is keen to get closer to the rows and rows of edible stalks.
"This seems familiar. Have we been here before? Maybe we've gone wrong, got turned round somehow."
No,
says the hammer. Agrees Vesper. The vagrant shakes his head, and Harm bows to the majority. Doors at the base of the tower stand open, welcoming. Nobody questions them as they go inside. The vagrant finds an empty bubble for the hammer and another for everyone else. Sleep comes quickly. In the morning, Vesper wakes first, but ensures the vagrant is only moments behind.
"It's good you put the hammer next door,"
Harm says quietly.
"I wanted to talk to you about her. I've been thinking about how best to handle her, and I've got a few ideas."
Shifting the baby to a comfortable feeding position, the vagrant turns his head to listen. After a few minutes, his eyebrows raise. When the hammer opens her eyes, she finds two men standing over her. Naturally, her fists clench, violent.
"Hello,"
says Harm. He crosses the curved floor with the vagrant's help and sits next to the usurperkin, one leg bent, the other forced straight out in front.
We wanted to know how you're feeling.
What?
Are you in pain?
The hammer frowns with childlike energy.
Why?
I've been looking at your armour. You never take it off. At first, we thought that was because you didn't want to let your guard down, but it's more than that. You can't take it off.
The hammer's fists do not relax. Harm looks at the cast on his leg, then at the unarmoured place on the hammer's arm. Her forearm is studded with metal bolts. Once they fixed a bracer in place. Now they are redundant. Some stand proud and ugly. Others hide just under the skin. All cause discomfort.
The stories say the usurper gave you the armour in person.
An already broad chest swells further.
Yes.
But it hurts all the time.
Yes.
Her head tilts forward, then up again, angry.
No!
Harm flinches away, toppling backward onto the vagrant's open palm.
I'm sorry. We know how strong you are. We know you can take the pain. But what we're trying to say is that if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Her two small lips part, but no words come.
It's up to you. Things can be different.
Giant fists raise, open, and plaster themselves over her face. Her body shakes with sadness, each sob ringing the armour like a dolorous bell. Harm edges closer, reaching out to rest two fingers on her exposed skin. He is careful to pick a place where the green is unbroken. In time, quieter tears spill. Shyly, the hammer reveals her face.
Will you?
Yes, answers Harm. We'll help you.
Neither of the men are surgeons, but Harm does what he can. The hammer keeps still as the green-eyed man works. Only her face moves, twisting with pain and something else, well hidden. As the first metal plug clunks onto the cloth, staining it with ooze, the vagrant gets up. He is eager to take Vesper and the goat for a walk. They stay outside for hours, Vesper enjoying the sputtering sprinklers, the vagrant wary and watching the sky. Meanwhile, the goat orbits on the end of her chain, terrorizing the chutes. A man is moving around the outer band of crops. He is bent low by his labours, fighting the stubborn weeds. Eventually, he kneels opposite the vagrant, separated by a few feet of foliage. Heads down, he speaks.
That's good. Keep looking up. Pretend I'm just like the others.
The vagrant does as he's asked.
I'm a friend and a servant of the winged eye, just like you.
The man intones his identification, soft, intricate.
There's somebody who's come a long way to meet you. She's waiting in Slake. I'm to take you to her. Are you ready to leave?
The man glances at him. The vagrant shakes his head.
Why not?
The vagrant gestures to his throat, shakes his head.
I see. Well, I'll be waiting here when you are. Be quick, though. If I can find you, it won't be long before they will.
The man says no more, going back to his weeding, drifting away from them. Returning to the bubble room, the vagrant finds the hammer asleep. Wadded bandages poke from holes on her body like flags of surrender. Harm slumps pale against the wall next to a stack of gory armour and rivets.
Worse than I thought,
he replies to the vagrant's questioning eyes.
It was awful. Some had been grown over, some were underneath her.
The vagrant holds up a hand.
I'll spare you the details.
Harm shakes his head.
You know, maybe it's pain as well as the taint that drives usurperkins.
They both regard the sleeping figure. Stripped of her armour, the hammer looks only slightly giant, her face almost human. One hand rests across her chest, surfing with each breath. Otherwise, she is still, effigy-like. An hour later, she wakes, but does not move. Invisible chains of fatigue and blood loss hold her in place. The vagrant tears new bandages, and Harm changes the dressings. The hammer accepts treatment, and afterwards, food. Harm's voice is soothing.
That's good. Try and get some more rest if you can. We have to go and meet somebody.
She tries to sit up, fails.
No, don't.
This isn't goodbye. We're coming back. I'll leave plenty of food and water for you. We're leaving the goat too. You're not strong enough to travel yet.
No!
The vagrant steps forward, helps the hammer to sit up. He turns her hand, curls the fingers as if she were holding a cup, and balances a coin on her index finger. He mimes tossing it again. She takes a deep breath and tries. Without gauntlets, her fingers fumble their way to the task. The coin jumps, somersaults, sings. Not as resonant as usual, a shorter, weaker sound. It does not matter. The hammer's eyes light with joy. The vagrant and Harm smile, and the usurper's daughter smiles back. She doesn't try and stop them when they leave, Harm's leg forcing them to an unpromising hobble. They find a man waiting for them outside.
Is this it?
The vagrant nods.
Come on, then. She doesn't like to be kept waiting.
Chapter 19. The man stays tight-lipped on the journey, giving an untrue name and little else. On this assignment, he is called Abel. But there have been other jobs and other identities. Abel is a veteran of the Winged Eyes Inquisition, sometimes called the Lenses. On the outskirts of Slake, there is an alternative way of travelling. The hooks. Large curves of sharp metal, lifted 5 feet from the floor, lined up one after the other, tight, gliding along their predetermined route. Oblivious to time or circumstance, the hooks keep their pace. At the top of each hook is a light. Some still work, illuminating their cargo for would-be thieves and hinting at degenerates hidden just out of sight. Though perpetually gloomy, Slake is full of noise. Conveyor belts groan, gears grind, distant rendering pits roar. Harm is attached to a hook. Slender limbs dangle down, weary. The Vagrant and Abel walk alongside. Most of the people here are armed. The uncivil has few laws, and those she does enforce protect the city and the infrastructure rather than its citizens. Technology is expensive and hard to replace. Tainted humans commonplace. They pass another lane of the hooks, and some of the cargo shrieks as it passes them. It is a common misconception that the necro-traders deal only in corpses. The best parts are bought and treated fresh. The Vagrant keeps his head down, and Vesper burrows deeper within his coat. Abel takes them to a broken factory, where floorboards rot and maggots thrive. The Vagrant watches the clouds of flies warily. On the top floor, hidden behind refuse and cracked engines, is a haven of cleanliness. 2 clear blocks of muti-gel serve as furniture. The first has been moulded into a chair, the second a cuboid work surface. On the second sits a smaller cube, each face alive with data, and on the first sits a woman who stands as they enter. Her face is proud, getting stronger as she ages. Authority oozes from her. She opens her long coat to reveal darkened armor and a neck chain, marked with feathers and power. The Vagrant takes a breath, and then drops to one knee, the sudden movement earning him a kick to the ribs. Less certainly, Harm bows. She is unmoved by their deference. These are the ones, Abel?
They are.
There are supposed to be 3. Where's Sir Attica? Harm glances at the Vagrant, who shakes his head sadly. Abel clears his throat.
This one's a mute.
Bloody inconvenient. And the other one? Can he talk?
It has been known,
says Harm quietly. Good. Where is your master?
I wasn't there when it happened, but it was a terrible loss for us all.
It's only terrible if he failed. Did he? Did you?
I don't know what you mean.
The woman looks at Abel, shakes her head. It looks like you found them just in time. I honestly don't know how they've managed to survive this long. Squires and Southerners. What a combination. They probably don't even know which holes to shit through. Harm grinds his teeth. The Vagrant keeps his head down. They have the sword, I take it?
Yes, ma'am.
Her hard eyes return to the Vagrant. Show me. The Vagrant stands, reveals Vesper and the sword. Abel, check the baby for taint. You bring the sword closer and draw it. Slowly. I don't want to attract unwanted attention. Vesper is unsure of the new pair of hands moving her, but enjoys the swift rotations. As the sword slides free, the woman's hand goes to her mouth. It is her turn to kneel. So it's true. She reaches out to touch the sword, hesitates, lowers her hand, the gesture incomplete. Thank you, she whispers. That's enough. The sword is put away. The woman stands, takes the room again. Forgive my earlier comments. It's this city. It makes me cranky. My name is Sapphire, and if Attica's dead, then I'm the last knight in the southern continent.
Excuse me,
Harm asks.
but where are the rest of the knights?
Where they're needed most, guarding the 7.
Where they're needed most.
Harm murmurs, incredulous. There are less than 100 of the old guard left, and squires learn slowly. We can't afford to waste any resources. She frowns suddenly, refocuses. We were told you were coming, and I was dispatched to find you and bring you home. We've had agents spread across this wasteland in deep cover for years, waiting for a sign you'd survived. I expected you a long time ago. What happened? Harm does not meet her eyes.
It's a long story.
I'm sure it is. And there'll be time for all of it when we're away from here. We'd just about given up hope when we started to hear rumours of a knight still alive in the south. We assumed it was Attica, but evidently it was you. Where are you keeping Attica's sword? The vagrant shakes his head again, his lips a grim line. You lost it! Damn! But wait! That means you've been using the Gamma's sacred blade. You! Ridiculous!
The baby is clean, ma'am.
Thank you, Abel. We'll take her back with us as well. So the sword allows you to use it? The vagrant nods. I hope you understand what an honour that is. Fire returns to her mutigel chair. It has not forgotten her contours. Everything is in place for our evacuation. We have a prearranged path through the blockade, and once through, an escort will take us to the coast where a ship is waiting. However, there is a secondary objective that your arrival has made possible. Harm pulls a face, but says nothing. One of our spies has been captured and taken to a rendering facility. Ironically, they have no idea of the knowledge he's carrying. They're only interested in his parts. We don't have long before he's processed, so we'll need to move quickly. Unfortunately, they've already attached him to an essence lock, and I daren't break it without risking his mind. We need a singing sword to manage it safely. I'm sure you see where you come in.
Why don't you use your sword?
Harm asks. A good, if impertinent, question. My sword isn't here. I didn't want to risk discovery.
But you want to risk Gamma's sword for this spy?
Fire stands up and strides over to Harm. What I want is to return the sword and the information to the 7 and to strike a blow against the sick practices of this city. What I do not want is another unprompted question from the likes of you. Are we clear?
Very.
We've identified the key figures in the operation and will take them out as a tertiary objective. At best, it will slow the uncivil's business by a few weeks, but it will remind the people that we have not forgotten them and give a much-needed boost to our other agents in the area. You can rest here while Abel and I make the final preparations.
I'm not going to be much use on a mission. I can hardly walk.
We can look at your leg, see if it's salvageable. Either way, you're right. But don't worry. I can think of another use for you. The bone wings appear to hang in the air as the world turns beneath them. Wonderland approaches, brightly lit, vibrant. Towers race each other to the stars, rendering a chaotic skyline. Necrotic pipes line the high ceilings. As the bone wings approach, a number of them lift up, like antennae, sphincters opening, gaping and splitting into 4 petal fingers, ready to accommodate the silent gliders. Bone wings and pipes meet, one sheathing itself in the other, rejoined. Wisps of essence detach themselves from the bone wings, rushing through the pipes. Before a bird can blink, they shoot through the ridged tunnels, across the roof, slipping within walls, and down again, beyond the cracked paving stones, into the bowels of the city, streaking to its centre, its beating heart, their mother, the uncivil. Since her arrival 6 years ago, the uncivil has worked ceaselessly, developing herself. Her secret stands in plain sight, too much for people to accept. Wonderland is more than her city. Wonderland is her, another of her many titles. Inch by inch she has added to her shell, the cloak of corpses, joining it to the metal and brick of the city. Unlike the usurper, she does not dominate the humans that live within her walls. She enhances them. Her cults are strong, lured to her side by the hope of immortality, and later of ascension. In return, they maintain the city, replacing her shell with fresh parts, fighting the daily decay the world pushes onto her. The uncivil digests the returned essence, considers what it tells her. Her agents in the south have been silenced, the half-city taken from her, and now the knights of jade and ash march upon her home. There is only one possibility. The usurper is pushing north, seeking to curtail her hard-won freedom. She will not allow this. Within the streets of Wonderland, veins pulse with intent. Whispers find their way to half-alive ears for warning. The city stirs. Vesper lies on the mutigel cube, a sailor on a jellied ocean. She kicks her legs, impatient. The vagrant presses the panel set into the base, and the mutigel softens, letting Vesper descend. He pushes again, and it remembers its old shape, bouncing Vesper into the air. Harm's smile lacks conviction.
Something about this feels wrong.
The vagrant ignores him, presses the panel again.
If that sword really belongs to one of the 7, why risk it on a mission in Slake? No information is that important.
He walks gingerly across the room, testing the flexible silver on his injured leg. It takes his weight.
And if I was a knight, I'd go with you myself, not hide on the outskirts of the city. Are you even listening to me? I don't trust her, and you shouldn't either.
The vagrant gives Harm a hard stare, raising a finger in warning.
I'm not allowed to voice my thoughts now, is that it?
The vagrant's finger curls back into his fist. He sighs and returns his attention to the mutigel.
Look, it's wonderful that we've got help. Really it is, but she's holding something back. I'm sure of it. Just promise me you'll keep your guard up.
Despite the vagrant's hurried nod, Harm isn't satisfied. A shy hand ventures out, rests on the vagrant's arm.
Please, be careful. For Vesper, if nobody else.
The vagrant looks up. For a while, the two men stare at each other. He nods again, slower, more resolute.
Thank you.
Swift footsteps on the stairs startle them. Sapphire and Abel reappear. Vesper kicks again. And again. Hastily, the vagrant clears the knight's seat and returns to one knee. Sapphire strides across the room and sits heavily. The final preparations have been made. It's time for you to leave. Any last questions? The vagrant shakes his head. Harm clenches his jaw and follows suit. Good. You will take the sword and go with Abel to the facility. While a second team takes out key personnel, the two of you will recover our operative. Remember, it's imperative that he be brought out alive and unharmed. I will take the wounded one and the infant to the edge of Slake and prepare our transport. Harm raises a hand.
We have another travelling companion, not far from here.
The mutant? Out of the question. She's too big a risk.
She's injured. She needs our help.
Help? According to my reports, that thing is a monster, more than capable of protecting herself and of ruining our mission. If she dies of her injuries, it will save us all a job. Harm takes a breath to speak. There is nothing more to say, unless you're volunteering to take care of her yourself.
No. My place is here.
Your place is where I say it is. We expect discipline from our squires, and we get it. Enough talk. There's work to be done. The men rise, gathering their things. Grimly she adds, Winged eye, watch us, measure us, judge us. Sapphire wastes no time in putting Harm to work. As soon as the vagrant and Abel are gone, the green-eyed man finds himself sat on the floor, sifting through a bucket of Nutri-Spuds. Despite multiple treatments, the modified vegetables have become hosts for some unidentified parasites. He checks each one by hand, sorting the fairly clean from the utterly rotten. When he finds the telltale holes, he digs in, scraping out hard-backed worms that sway angrily from his fingertips. The worms are put into a jar for purposes unknown, and the Nutri-Spuds join their fellows in the bucket. Next to him is the Mutigel cube, the top formed into a bowl for Vesper to recline in. Rather than sleep, the baby attempts to roll to freedom. Regular grunts mark each attempt, becoming steadily louder as her frustration grows. Sapphire enters the room, studying the bucket with a critical eye. Make sure you do a thorough job. You wouldn't want any of those things to end up in your gut.
When you said you had a job in mind for me, I'd imagined something different.
I have no interest in your imaginings. Just get the job done. Harm presses his lips together and picks up another Nutri-Spud, cutting into it savagely. Vesper rocks back and forth, trying to roll over, but each time the cube adjusts, softening around her. Foiled, she flops onto her back and stamps her feet. The banging draws Sapphire's attention. The knight leans over the cube, curling her lip. Such a noisy, undisciplined thing she is. Quiet now. The command is ignored. Quiet, I say.
Good luck with that,
murmurs Harm. Sapphire places a finger and thumb on the soft skin of Vesper's thigh and pinches. Vesper's expression moves quickly from shock to outrage to the purest misery. She begins to cry. Quiet, repeats the knight. Harm's eyes narrow.
What are you doing?
Teaching this child some discipline.
Is that what you call it?
In the shining city they'd have her in a choir by now, and she'd have learned how to listen. Vesper shrieks as fingers and thumb pinch again, merciless. The Nutri-Spud drops from Harm's fingers. The small knife does not.
For someone so keen on obedience, you seem pretty bad at observing it yourself.
Fire whirls round, baby forgotten. What did you say, Squire?
Oh, come on. You've waited all these years to retrieve Gamma's sword, and now it's here. You send it out into danger. This isn't just about what the spy knows. It's about him. You want to rescue him.
Of course I do. She crosses to him, uncomfortably close. I am responsible for the lives of all the operatives here in Slake. Green eyes flash, triumphant.
But he's not one of the lenses, is he? Let alone an operative. No, wait. It's more than that. He's your love.
Her boot presses down on his injured leg. Quiet! He glares at her, and she keeps up the pressure until his head drops, hissing in defeat. That's better. Now get on with your job. We need to make our way to the rendezvous shortly, and before that, we need to eat. She strides out, shaking her head. Pathetic. Vesper raises her head, peering over the edge of the cube.
Sorry,
Mouths Harm. Little feet begin to drum furiously, louder than ever, accompanied by random noises. Harm smiles, wipes his eyes, and gets back to work. Slake never sleeps. Even in the dark, figures hurry through streets, eyes glancing, avoiding contact. The vagrant blends in easily, walking just close enough to Abel to keep him in sight. Before long, the outside of the facility looms, dirty and featureless, giving little away. Cargo, living and otherwise, is brought by loaders to the front entrance, a blank square of a mouth with 2 conveyor belt tongues. Abel moves to a side door where a man stands guard, lightly armoured, a plague-maker pistol twitching in his hands. Wait here, he says. I'll deal with this. The vagrant does as he's told, while Abel shuffles forward, like a junkie keen for a fix. Words exchange between the 2 men, and backs of hands are pressed together. The vagrant sees a crack of light where skin touches skin. They separate, and Abel disappears through the door. A minute later, the guard checks the street and waves the vagrant in. The corridor is cramped, with hot walls and dry air. Abel leans close, whispering in the vagrant's ear. The other team's already in place. We've got 30 minutes to do what we need to do before they attack. I've got a route to storage that should be safe, but stay sharp. There's no guarantees. Lightly and quickly, the 2 men advance. Abel often consults his hand where lines of light draw and redraw the facility's floor plan. The door to storage is unprotected. They slide back the metal bolt and roll it open. Mist hisses into the corridor, chilling their feet. It passes, revealing racks of bodies wrapped in clinging plastic, snug as skin. The room takes up the majority of the building, and it is packed full. Men and women of all ages, ordered by health, age, and degree of taint. Some have already been partially harvested, their stumps neatly stitched. Abel goes inside, examining the tags on the nearest body. Our mark is fit and barely tainted. He'll be further down on the right. You take that row, I'll take this one. But the vagrant remains in the corridor, fingers on the seal around the door, digging tight. At his side, an eye opens, peering between silver feathers, baleful. Abel's voice is dampened by the room, made ghostly.
"I've found him. Over here."
Slowly, the vagrant's hand lets go, a memory of his nails left behind in rubber. He watches the floor carefully, keeps his arms by his sides, and ventures in. He finds Abel examining a man. "We're in luck. He's not been touched. Time for you to do your part." The vagrant leans forward, studying the man more closely. Beneath the exoskin, the face is young and handsome, dark-haired. An infernal holds his mind still, forming a scab-like bandage across the lower half of his face. Mouth, nose, and ears are covered. His eyes still move, however, full of life. The vagrant draws the sword, lowering the flat of the blade towards the man's lips. Blue-tinged light falls upon the scab, making it twitch and detach. The scab extends a tooth, cutting its way free of the plastic, fleeing the light which smokes upon its back. The vagrant skewers it on the point of the sword and flicks it to the floor, where it shrivels to ashes. Abel starts peeling the rest of the plastic from the man. "Can you hear me, Jaden? I'm a friend." He quickly intones his identification and offers the back of his hand. Coughs and laboured breathing pass as a reply, then a voice, choked with cold.
Who are you?
Abel lowers his hand, untouched. His pause is barely noticeable. "Fire sent me."
Fire! She's here.
"Nearby. I'll take you to her."
Jaden struggles to stand. His muscles are frost-tight.
"Sorry about this,"
Abel says, reaching into his belt pouch.
About what?
Abel raises the med gun and fires it against Jaden's thigh. He talks through the other man's gasp.
"It's a quick-fix cocktail. You'll feel like shit in the morning, but it should be enough to keep you pepped till we're clear of Slick."
Thank you. Do you have any clothes?
"Right here."
As Jaden is helped to dress, the sword's eye darts back and forth across the bodies. Unwillingly, the vagrant follows its gaze. For every person, there is a parasite, breathing with them and holding them still. He frowns, looking pained.
Come on,
says Abel, moving past him with Jaden in tow.
Time to go.
He follows, sluggish. Rows of imploring eyes track his retreat. The vagrant keeps his head down. Inexplicably, his free hand is drawn to his side, touching his ribs. The vagrant stops and lets out a long sigh. A cloud births briefly at his lips.
Something wrong?
Asks Abel from the doorway. The vagrant looks up, shakes his head. He raises the sword with a flourish. The air trills, and an army of scabs quiver, fearful. Abel speaks quickly, urgently.
This isn't in the plan. Think. We do what we're supposed to do. We save a life right now, and with the sword and the info, we save countless more. You have to keep your head, or we're all going to die.
Yeah, agrees Jaden. Let's get out of here while we can. The vagrant's shoulders droop, and he takes a step forward, then another. Then he stops. Again he presses a hand to his ribs. A strange smile touches his face. He brings the sword tight to his body and begins to spin. A song is sung in all directions. It is simple, of one note. The scabs understand immediately, dropping away from their hosts, seeking sanctuary, finding none. Trapped between their former prisoners and a layer of plastic, they writhe, then burn. Throughout the building, alarms sound, shaking skulls and racing hearts. People jerk to life, like sleepers thrown in cold water. They strain against their bonds, stretching them till they break. Some fall, some climb from the racks. The fastest leap to their feet, staggering, and race for the door. The vagrant is waiting for them, sword barring their exit. They ask him to move, their blue lips cracking with the effort. He points past them to those still struggling, the injured, the young. They look into his eyes, just once, then run back, offering assistance. Behind him, two voices argue.
Let's just go. Leave him here. You came here for me, right?
In part.
That's better than nothing, man. If we stay, we'll both end up in that freezer. And I can't go back. I'd rather die.
Abel notes the preference, offers Jaden a pistol. The other man takes it, his hands uneasy on the grip.
How long till the meds wear off?
4 hours at peak effectiveness. Then you'll have up to another 2 before the side effects kick in.
Side effects?
Later. Come with me. Cover the corridor.
Within the giant freezer, chaos reigns. Those on the top levels wriggle free as best they can, toppling onto hard floors or other victims. Weakened muscles cramp and tear, legs break, tempers fray. Only the sword's presence keeps panic at bay. The vagrant joins Abel and Jaden at the doorway, and a pale army comes after. Numb feet slipping, teeth